Salute everyone. Welcome on this fine evening. Hope everybody is well. Knicks Nation. Got a fun show tonight. I'm joined by two of the best in the biz, EJ, John SCHMEELK. It's a pleasure to have you back. And
What's
how
up,
are we
man?
doing?
We're good.
That's
John,
good.
always good to have you. It's a pleasure to have you back here on Knicks Buzz.
Always happy to talk some Knicks, guys.
Absolutely. Salute to the chat, replay gang, everyone out here. Join the conversation in the comment section in the chat. It's going to be fun. And John, yeah, we caught up pre-season training camp. There's been a lot happen up and down season. Kind of what we thought, but I want to get both your initial impressions. From the first 21 games.
Yeah, I mean, I think the end result is where you thought they were going to be, right? I mean, 10 and 12 is around 500. They've been up and down. They've done better against the bad teams. They've struggled being the teams that have that one great player that's going to outplay them in fourth quarters. I mean, Jean Morant, Giannis, go through the list, whatever game you want to talk about. And, we can get into some of the details, but overall, they've played like a 500 team because they're a 500 team. We all kind of thought that's what they were going to be. So I honestly don't get all the hand-wringing and panicking that I'm seeing out there because, I mean, isn't this kind of what we thought it was going to be?
Yeah, it's
No
hard.
doubt.
Yeah, it's hard to get upset. I mean, I know we do get upset, but they're playing what like you just said, John. I mean, they are playing just the same way a 500 team would play. So they're going to be frustrating at times. They're going to be really exciting at times, and they're going to be times where they're going to exceed our expectations, and they're going to be times where they're like, why are they so pitiful? That's what 500 teams in the NBA do. They're doing exactly what many of us expected them to do.
And look, when you're missing CT, that star player, this is what you're going to get. I mean, Rick Brunson, I did it again. Jalen Brunson's a good player.
Only did that.
And it's funny, and at the Milwaukee game, Mike Walczewski, the Knicks PA guy, said, checking back in Rick Brunson. I was laughing my butt off. It was hilarious. And I'm sitting there, I do that too. But, when you don't have that great player, and, at Jalen Brunson at his best is a low-end all-star, so you're looking at what, like the 30th best player in the league, 28th best player in the league, however you want to qualify it, 35th on a bad, whatever. Like, they don't have that top 20 guy, let alone that top 10 guy. And when you don't have that guy, it's going to be hard to be much better than a 500 team. That's just the way the league works.
Yep. We've definitely seen them play tough against these tougher teams, rise up and give it their all. But yeah, the shortcomings ultimately down the stretch and throughout the game, is their undoing, and we'll talk about that. But, after that, give us your top things that you've been, I guess, most pleased or satisfied with so far, and a couple of things that still gripe you that you think could be fixed or you think could be better than what they've shown.
Yeah, I mean, I think the best thing we've seen all year has been Jalen Brunson. I mean, he's been as advertised. He's been fantastic. He runs the team. He's turned Randle into a more efficient player because Randle hasn't had to do as much offensively. I would like to see him shoot the three a little bit better, but that can kind of apply to the entire team at this point. But look, Brunson's been as advertised, worth every penny. I think in a couple years, or maybe even a year, the contract's going to be seen as a bargain, and he's going to be a plus player on a good deal.
Yep.
And he's a good starting point guard. Is he a great defender? No, but he tries. He tries with drawing the charges, help defense, but he's limited physically. But look, he's the best point guard I've seen on the Knicks. If you want to go prior to Stephon Marbury, because he was a little wacky, go down back to Derek Harper. He's probably the best Knicks point guard since Derek Harper. So that's pretty good. That's been a plus. Cam Reddish has been a huge surprise to me. I mean, the way he played last year, and frankly, the way he played in the preseason, I thought he would be buried on the bench and be a non-factor, and that would have turned out to be one of the worst moves of the Leon Rose era, trading that pick for him. But Reddish has come alive this year. He shot it okay. His defense has been great. He's been very active. I think Thibodeau has gotten through to him on that end of the floor. And every time he's out there, whether it's offensively or defensively, he makes a move, and you say to yourself, man, that dude is not only the most athletic player on the Knicks, he's the most athletic player on the floor. And he does one of those things every time he's out there. It's not consistent. Otherwise, he'd be playing, 40 minutes a game and be a star in the league. but I think you've seen enough where now you have to figure out how you keep them around to keep developing those skill sets. And if I was to pick a third thing, and fans are going to get on me for this, I've been impressed with Tom Thibodeau's flexibility this year. You know, fans get mad at him. Who else do you want him to play?
Yeah.
Quickly's playing 25 minutes a game. Derrick Rose has been limited to 10 to 12. You know, I know Obi's not playing as much as other people want still, and I get that, but Randle's in front of him. It's just the way it's going to be. Grimes, after he got through the injury, he's starting now playing 20 minutes a game. He's playing Reddish when Reddish started playing better. He's playing 20 minutes a game. I mean, I don't know. He benched Fournier, which fans wanted. He's playing Randle and Obi together, which fans wanted. Against Milwaukee of all teams, who they couldn't rebound against worth for most of the year, but he still puts those two guys out there together. The team is a much better pace. They're pushing the ball more. They're running up and down. They have I don't think they're top 10 anymore after the Milwaukee game, but a borderline top 10 offense. And I think he's kind of done a lot of the things people want him to do, but people still want to kill the dude, which is weird to me. And again, I'm not a huge Thibodeau guy. I don't think he's like the best coach in the league. I don't think he's great, but I think he's done a okay job this year, to be quite honest with. And I think he's playing a lot of the guys, fans want him to play. I'm not quite sure what else they want him to do from a lineup perspective, to be quite honest with you.
EJ?
Yeah, it's Thibodeau is the easiest target for frustration when it comes to a 500 team. You can't easily orchestrate a trade that's going to catapult us into the top four. So he's an easy target. And I think, especially with as little interaction as Leon Rose has with the media, without engaging in like being a public face, Thibodeau is the public face of the New York Knicks organization right now. So when the team does poorly, or when the team doesn't seem to match the expectations that some fans might have, he becomes the easiest scapegoat. When many of us, when we had our predictions, we all pretty much said there's going to be around a 500 team, and that's exactly where they are. So, yeah, go ahead, John.
No, I'm sorry, EJ, I didn't interrupt you. And I think you hit 100% on the head. And I go through this with the Giants. And, if you guys are Giant fans, go check out Giants Podcast Network, Giants.com, all that stuff. Fans are always looking for the easy solution, right? Mm-hmm. They want the silver bullet, and they're looking for the silver bullet. And the easiest silver bullet's always the head coach. Yep. Because it's a lot harder to say, oh, boy, this roster's flawed, and we need to make a lot of changes. Oh, boy, it's going to take a few years to figure this out. That's hard. That's patience. That's what fans don't want. But, oh, boy, if we replace Tom Thibodeau, he'll unlock Obi Toppin, and he'll become Amari Stoudemire, and then we're going to be a 60-win team. That's easy. It's completely unrealistic, but it's easy. You know what I mean? Yeah.
And John, and the other issue, too, is that sometimes a coach can't have players unlearn or undo bad habits or bad tendencies. Or, sometimes, like, for example, a player's intelligence, their basketball intelligence or their football intelligence, whatever the sport is, it is what it is. So, for example, when we start talking about RJ, as much as we all love RJ and we want RJ to be, what we think and what we hope he can be, there are some tendencies that I don't know if that's going to be uncoached. That's just the growth of a player, the maturation of a player. Basketball IQ, that's what everyone calls it. I don't know if that's, in the heat of the moment, in the heat of battle, is that something that if the person has the tendency, that can be like coached and uncoached out of them, So I think Thibodeau just remains an easy target. But going back to your original question, CT, things that I'm happy about. I mean, John hit on a lot of them. And the one thing that I would hit on too is that I'm really happy when I see that really young lineup on the court. Like I think the other night there was a lineup of Obi was on the floor and Cam was on the floor and Mitch was on the floor. And there are times where you see this interplay of all of these young players. And that's what a lot of us fans wanted, knowing that the Knicks had no shot in winning a championship. That makes me excited to see Cam have this renaissance. Where did this come from? Where did this come from? I have no idea. It's mind-boggling, but it's also encouraging to know, okay, the value of Cam has skyrocketed exponentially. IQ having, turning into somewhat of a defensive presence on the floor, that is encouraging. So I think we have to kind of have realistic expectations and know that if we're not going to necessarily win 60 games or 50 games, IQ improving can be a discovery. Those are wins. And I will take those wins if we can't win a championship.
Yeah, definitely. The small wins within the games, wins or losses, the small wins within there. This organization, the big topic, gentlemen, is, are the Knicks moving in a right direction? Are they in purgatory? And if they're not, high up in the standings and they're not super low, what are they doing? Well, we did hit on a few things. We are developing some of these young players. To me, that's probably top of the tree for me in pleasant things this season. The fact that these younger players are getting an opportunity that we didn't expect so far. So where does it go from here? Let's hope that we continue to see more of that. And and it has been fair. I guess the Grimes injury, how much did that have an impact, John, with Cam's start?
Yeah, he got an opportunity, and I'm not sure that opportunity would have been there if Grimes hadn't gotten hurt. Now, I was never worried about it. A lot of fans were freaking out when Grimes got healthy and all of a sudden he wasn't in the rotation. I always knew Thibodeau was going to get him back in there, and the minute a couple guys got hurt, he was immediately back in the starting lineup and playing his minutes. So that never surprised me because, look, Grimes does something few players on this team can do. He can be good on both ends of the floor. Yeah. He can defend and he can shoot. As an off-ball player, oh my God, he cuts to the basket. Someone else can watch that, by the way, and maybe they can do that too. And he can pass when he cuts to the basket on the way to the hoops. I mean, these are amazing things that maybe other players should watch and learn from. So, yeah, this season was never about the wins for me. I was very realistic. All right, you get the 10 seed and you play a playing game. Woo, I'm excited. You get wiped out in the first round, whatever. I'll get to sell my Knicks playoff tickets, make some money. That's great. But other than that, like I'm not super pumped up to go watch them get smacked by the Celtics in 3 games and watch Jason Tatum go for 40 and Jalen Brown go for 25. Look, I'm going to go to the games with a pair of my tickets. I sell my other pair, but okay, that's great. But I think to your guys' point, it's about the development of the young guys because that's where we're going here, right? Unless you really don't make it into the play-in, the chance of moving up in the lottery is going to be slim. You can maybe trade up with some of your extra picks or players, and I'd be all in favor of that. So I think what you're trying to do here is develop your assets so they either become the sidekicks to the eventual star you trade for, or they're part of a package to trade for that star. And it works both ways, right? Yeah. So, yeah. And I think, and I guess this is, if you want me to transition to my negatives, I can here. But I think for the most part, Reddish, arrow pointing up. Obi Toppin with his shooting, much improved. Now it's come back down to earth a little bit, but it's still better than it was. Arrow pointing up. Emmanuel Quickly, the improvements on defense, arrow pointing up. Grimes has been fine. I don't think we've seen enough to think he's up yet, but at least it's steady, right? He's been good.
Yep.
Mitch, when he's been healthy, I mean, he's been really good this year defensively. Arrow pointing up. When Cam Sims has played, he's been good too. Jericho Sims. Sorry, Cam Sims is the receiver for the Washington Commanders. I'm still in football mode here. When Jericho Sims,
Jericho Jumpman.
Absolutely, arrow up. He's playing well, and I'll transition now to my negatives. The guy who's not is the guy that they need the most to become that next guy, and that's RJ Barrett. I would love for RJ to show up after an offseason and look like a much different player. We haven't seen it yet. We've seen incremental improvement in areas, shooting being the biggest one, though I would like to actually see him start a season not shooting like 3 of his first 35 from 3, which he seems to do every year. Yep. But this shooting is coming around than I thought it would. But I would like to see a big jump somewhere, whether it's off-dribble shooting, more moves. He has to be more than a guy that's just a straight-line drive guy. Shoot off the dribble, something. Become a better passer going to the basket. Yeah. And I think my biggest thing with RJ, while we've seen, again, incremental improvements in specific areas, largely, he's still the same player at his core that he was at Duke. He's a guy that wants to drive to the basket, take some poor attempts at the rim, is inefficient, is not a great shooter. And by the way, even when he was at Duke and he had Zion Williamson, guess who was trying to take all the big shots at the end of the game? It was RJ Barrett. It wasn't Zion. And he wanted to be that guy, but he wasn't good enough to be that guy. And I would love to see RJ until those skills develop, where maybe his ability can match his mentality, embrace being an all-around player rather than trying to be a 25-point scorer. Like, he can't, unless he takes 30 shots a game, he's not going to be a 25, 27-point scorer. He's just not. He's not efficient enough, right? Be a better defender. His defense has sucked this year. It's been bad. There's no reason for that. And no, he shouldn't be guarding quicker guards because he never has been that. But there's no reason he can't guard threes. Like, there's no reason he can't guard threes. And that's caring, and that's making it a priority, and that's focusing on that end. We've seen him play better defense as a pro. We know he can do it. And especially with much less offensive weight on his shoulders, with Brunson here, Randle still here, and the other guys doing more, the other young guys, he doesn't have to use as much energy on offense. Be a better defensive player. Be a better passer. Like, do those types of things to be that all-around player that'll help a really good team win games. And I don't think he's to the point where he wants to accept that type of role yet, which is a shame because I still think that's eventually, when he hits his peak in the league, that's what he's going to be.
Yeah. Before I kick it to EJ, I'll just say,
Yeah.
remember there was a report, Tom Thibodeau's aim was to make Jalen Brunson a better defender. Well, RJ Barrett is arguably that project that Tom Thibodeau can leave while he's here, that legacy, that mark on RJ Barrett, the same way he did with Jimmy Butler, EJ.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if there's anything I can add after what John just said. I mean, I think RJ is perhaps the biggest concern for this season. And who would have thought that after last season, when most of us were discussing the fate of Julius Randle. But I will say, like, when John was speaking, I was just thinking to myself, like, how there are elements of the game that concern me with regards to RJ Barrett. So for me as a basketball player, there's the mentality that you have, and he has that mentality. He has that, I'm going to go after it, and you love that. But the concerning side of it is the intelligence. Like, for example, when I think of the intelligent basketball players, I think of Chris Paul, who you can almost see calculus numbers going and floating in his head as he's driving to the basket, because he's already calculated how many different possibilities exist while I'm in the midst of this. You can always see with RJ, when he's driving to the lane, there's only one option. Maybe three. RJ, Rowan, Barrett Jr. Like, he is going to shoot that. And so if you're a defender, there's no need to sag off on him because you know exactly what he's going to do. And then the other part of it that's concerning too is that the sometimes inconsistent free throws, which we've seen happen periodically, that's concerning. So right now, my concern is not just for this season, it's about how well is his game going to age. There are certain players who you can kind of see, okay, they're going to have a solid 5-6 year career. But what John was talking about are what are those habits that are going to allow for him to have a longer career and a healthier career, and one that's more sustainable and productive. And that right now is what's concerning to me is, does he have the kind of basketball intelligence that will lead to a game that is sustainable and be multifaceted? At this point, I don't see it, and that's concerning.
Yeah, and by the way, it's not just intelligence, it's instincts.
Yes.
That's kind of what comes naturally to you, right? When you drive and you see things and you have a natural instinct of the right thing to do with the ball. And it seems to me that too often he predetermines what he's going to do. And most of the time it's a shot, right?
Yeah.
Most of the time it's a shot, to your point. But we've seen times too where he goes, all right, I'm lobbing it to Mitch here.
Mm-hmm.
And whether that lob is there or not, that lob's getting thrown. And sometimes Mitch gets it, sometimes he doesn't. So I think, Tom Thibodeau always talks about rim reads, right? Making the right rim read.
Yeah.
He doesn't make rim reads. He makes decisions before he gets to the rim, and that's what he's going to do.
Yeah,
and that's what he needs to get better at.
Yeah, he's forcing it a bit. And we surveyed in the chat says, please develop in a mid-range because that's a key part of his game. Why is it always a three-point shot, with RJ? It seems to be a layup or a three. I don't know if that's just coaching direction, but he grew up apparently idolizing and watching DeMar DeRozan, in Toronto, a mid-range assassin. Start there. The free throw's been coming along. That's a bit better, but why not just start with a shorter shot? Why does it have to be the three ball immediately? He might be a player that doesn't develop a great three-point shot till he's 28, 29, like Jason Kidd,
No, you're right. And look, the other comp people have from him is Jimmy Butler, right?
Yeah.
I'm not a big person that ever made that comp, but that's the comp people
Mm.
have for him. Jimmy Butler lives from 10 to 18 feet. He
Yep.
feasts there. Barrett's a strong guy. Use your strength more, and pull up. Yeah, look, there are a lot of things. And I think another negative thing is just the overall defense. And it's
Yeah.
been bad. I mean, the Knicks have been a bad defensive team. We talk about RJ individually. Randle individually defensively has been bad. Brunson, we know his issues, just physically, he's a smaller guy, he's not super fast, so he's going to struggle, he's not long. And those are three of your guys playing 35 minutes a game. So Mitchell Robinson can't make up for all that. Grimes can't make up for all that. Cam Reddish can't make up for all that. Quickly can't make up for all that. And look, we've seen the Knicks defense start slowly other years too under Tom Thibodeau. I think it takes a while for the detailed rotations and things like that to kind of take hold with repetition throughout a year. And I think the last couple of years, the Knicks have been lucky early in years. They face a lot of teams that haven't made their three-point shots, but this year teams are making their threes. Even teams that shouldn't make their threes, like the Thunder, who came in as one of the worst three-point shooting teams in the league. But no, in this game, Lou Dort's going to shoot 5 to 6. It's like that happens, right? So they've caught some bad breaks with that. I think the defense will get better, but certainly through the first quarter of the year, the defense has been a huge minus, and it's something they're going to have to get better at. Or they might only be a 35-win team. If they finish the year, guys, ranked below 20th defensively, they're probably not going to get the 38, 39 wins because their offense is not going to be able to carry them for most of the year, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, and we've seen them, gentlemen, chat in close games. So the offense is keeping them in games, but they've failed to get those stops at the end. I'm talking 50 seconds left, going under a screen, focusing, split-second decisions that hurt you. Shot selection, John, and we'll get to some stuff that you've been tweeting out about, taking polls and stuff. But yeah, I did see your tweet about RJ shot selection, towards the end, and obviously it's crunch time. Players need that confidence to take a shot. But at the same time, I like the game in Jalen Brunson's hands, the ball.
Yeah.
He came up short against Memphis.
But he got a good shot, though. He got a good shot, and he just happened to miss it. And that's fine. It's a much better shot than RJ took.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I like that shot, EJ, I want the ball in Jalen Brunson's hands.
I want the ball in Jalen Brunson's hands because he has options. He creates options. He has, if one is not available, then he'll move to two. If two's not available, then there's three. You can see him thinking on the court. That shot that RJ, I guess I'll never get a Twitter follow from RJ at this point after tonight. But that shot, it clearly, he might be watching. But that shot wasn't really well thought out. It was more of a reaction shot. It was an in the moment shot. It wasn't a composed, really well thought out decision. And so that's what's really frustrating. Was it a decision that was made after he failed to get over that screen? I mean, was that a compensation shot? And that's not what you need. Hero ball. And that's not what you need.
It's hero ball.
Yeah, and that's what's really maddening. That's really frustrating. And to your previous question too, I'm a little bit frustrated with all of the complaining that happens.
Yes.
And I do think that the refs have had a horrible string of games recently with some of the Knicks calls. However, that complaining it's indicative of a team that realizes maybe that they're not as talented as some of these other teams, but at the same time, keep your composure. That's part of this idea of growing and maturing as a team. You can't complain
and
to the refs.
Get back on defense. Stop complaining and get back on defense.
Exactly. There's no point. There's no point. The ref is not going to change the call. I've never seen a ref, after making a call, decide, you know what? Your complaint sold me. Let's stop the game, reverse the call, replay that. Doesn't work.
No, I'm with you. And I guess if you want the third thing, I'm disappointed, and it's the defensive rebounding. I guess that's linked to the defense overall. But there's no reason this team should be rebounding as poorly as they are.
Yeah.
And I understand Hartenstein's not a good rebounder, and Obi Toppin still not a good defensive rebounder. But with Mitch and Julius and RJ and Quickly's been a really good guard rebounder, right? You got to rebound the ball better. You got to get out of these possessions, and that's a big reason the defense is so bad. It's transition defense and it's allowing offensive rebounds. If you can fix those two things, The defensive numbers will get much better really fast. So, Randle, you have his issues too, and I think even though he's a good offensive player, bad defensive player, I think the organization's better off with everything put together if he's not on the team. So you can throw him into that mix there if you want to, but the rebounding and the defense, that's what's really holding this team back right now from being, a 42, 43 win team, I think.
Yeah, better than that. But yeah, the positive is that these young players are getting an opportunity. They're growing. We've got another, quarter of the season before we hit the trade deadline. And I think this front office, there's been some great reporting that there's heightened security around, scrutiny around this team. And they're no doubt looking for towards how the season unfolds in the next quarter. We'll look at some bigger picture stuff as well. In terms of, what would you do differently? We've talked about the positives, but John, EJ, is there anything that you're, having your eye on at the moment that you would like to see them change up heading in?
Can I comment on the whole scrutiny on the team thing for a second before I hit that? I think it's ridiculous. If you want to make a coaching change, that's fine, but there are fans out there that want to fire Leon Rose. That would be the dumbest thing that you could possibly do at this point.
Do you think some of those really bad losses contributed to that?
It's brutal. It was a brutal game, and I get people upset about it. That's fine. But how quickly did they think Leon Rose is going to turn this around? He's 2.5 seasons in, right? Or 2.25 seasons in. In his first year, the Knicks won 41 games in a 72-game season. In their other season, they won 37 games. The Knicks have not won that many games in a season since 2003 in any year where Carmelo Anthony was not on the roster. 37 wins is more wins than this team has had in any year since 2003 that Carmelo Anthony was not on the roster. And that doesn't include the 41 wins that they had in the 72-game year. And you're firing a GM after 2 years?
We keep going back to that 4th seed. That created more expectation, I think.
It's so dumb. I mean, when he took the job, they were 21-45. They fired a coach mid-season. They were a mess and a disaster. At least they're competent. And here's the most important thing. They've become competent without liquidating their assets.
Yeah.
They're set up nicely. They have 4 extra first-round picks. I know they're protected. They have extra second-round picks. And I know their salary cap is not good for the next 2 years, and they're capped out a little bit. And if you want to call Randle's contract an albatross, I guess you can. But you don't have a bunch of Jerome James and Eddie Curry contracts on this team that are, toxic assets that you have to attach multiple first-round picks to move. So Leon Rose has gotten this team as good as they've been in the post-Patrick Ewing era when Melo's not been on the roster without trading away any first-round picks. In fact, they've acquired 4 extra ones. And now people want to fire the general manager because of a couple of decisions like drafting Obi over Halliburton. Yeah, it was a bad decision. I didn't like the pick at the time. It's one draft decision. He also got Quickly in the 20s, and he got Grimes in the 20s, okay? Those are good moves. Why? Because you trade a couple second-round picks to get off of, Kemba Walker and Nerlens Noel, whatever. Cry me a river. They're second-round picks. It's not that big of a deal. I mean, it's insane that people want to hit the reset button. Like, when they hire Leon Rose, what do they think? It'd be a 2-year process and they're back? Do they not pay attention to the NBA? Unless you get lucky in the lottery and get a transformational player, turnarounds don't happen quickly in the NBA. It takes time to develop young players. There's no other path here unless you're going to tear it down to the studs and do a complete rebuild, and James Dolan's not going to let them do that. So I don't know what other people are looking for. I don't know what they want, but hitting the reset button now with the front office would be wildly unproductive and stupid. That's my piece.
You can drop the mic if you want to. Just drop it. I agree. I think that this is the difficulty of being at this point of building a franchise and making it a reputable franchise. I think part of what we have to remember is how much of a laughingstock the Knicks were, 5-6 years ago. We have to remember that there was a planned protest outside of Madison Square Garden you have to remember
Oh,
that there were allegations that Phil Jackson had fallen asleep during draft meetings. You know, you have to remember Joakim Noah, that contract. That's not
the
too long ago.
Fizdale will get
Yeah,
you
you have to
right.
I
remember
forgot about that
Fizdale.
one. That's a good one.
Emil's
You, you
presser.
you have to remember that there was a whole mini documentary. Here's the one. Here's the one. A mini documentary on the triangle offense. That
Spike.
wasn't too long ago by Spike
Yeah.
Lee, if memory serves me correctly.
Oh,
hmm
man.
So that's not an alternate reality. That's like 6, 7 years ago. So, becoming a competent, respectable organization that might attract top tier free agents, that doesn't happen overnight. Uh, Finding the right piece, and here's the other piece I think sometimes we forget, finding the right pieces that not only want to be in New York, but that can handle the pressure cooker of playing in New York, that's also a difficulty as well. Landing the right draft picks, that's luck. Sometimes, a player might get injured. Sometimes, look what happened in Philadelphia. Uh, Markel Fultz. Yeah, anyone remember Markel Fultz? Fultz, like the process was really bumpy, and the process is not even guaranteed to win a championship at this point. So
Nope.
again, that's what makes basketball a great sport is that one player can be transformative, but getting that player at the right time in the right place with the right price, that's what makes it incredibly difficult. So,
hmm
you kind of have to give the organization a little bit of leeway to get it right. It's not going to happen within 2 years, 2.5 years.
I think this front
I'm with you.
office has bought themselves a bit more time. But I think the first move, if there is one, would be the coach. There's talk William Wesley had, was pushing for that, and Leon was given the green light from Dolan to make that move. So I think that's going to be the first move if there is one. But there's probably going to be a minor shake up of the roster. I've always said I don't think this will be the roster that finishes the season. You got Derrick Rose, Fournier, and quickly garnering some interest. So then, if you guys are sort of feeling content with where this team's humming along, what point will it get to where you feel like something has to be, look, or what are you looking at the most with a timeline where, okay, like I'm going to give this much time before we need to see something happen?
I mean, I don't think you can put a set timeline on it because then you make moves you shouldn't make to try to rush it when it's not there. And I think that could hurt you. But I agree. I think they will make a move at some point this year. I hope it's not a panic move because they don't have enough wins and they're just trying to get better. But and this is kind of goes back to the other point. When's the last time we looked at the Knicks roster and you said, "Boy, they have too many good players and they don't have enough minutes to play good players"? I mean, it wasn't a few years ago when the Knicks are playing guys 25, 30 minutes that wouldn't even get minutes on another NBA team. And now they have too many guys and they don't have enough minutes to dole out to players. So that's a good problem to have. But there does have to be a consolidation at some point with a lot of these young guys and veterans where there's just too many guys to play. And, maybe it's Hartenstein. They move him out. And, Jericho Sims becomes the backup center.
Mm.
I don't think they'll find a taker for Fournier. If they can find somebody that'll give you even a second round pick for Derrick Rose, I think you make the trade. I'm fine with that. Couple of twos, whatever you can get for him. I do not want to trade Emmanuel Quickly. I'm not a Quickly stan like everyone else, where I think he's going to be Steph Curry in a couple of years. But
He's
he's a
solid.
good all around player. He can help on any team. I think his shooting will come around. It's been disappointing the last 100 or so regular season games, but I think it'll get back to where it needs to be. And I think the other parts of his game are strong enough where he can be a 20-minute player on pretty much any team in the league and help them win because he's good at everything. But yeah, I mean, I do think they have too many guys, and at some point you're going to have to consolidate. I would love to move Randle. I don't think they'll find the taker for him, especially during the season. Would I consider moving Obi for a first-round pick? I personally would. I think he's a fine player, but it's hard to play power forwards in this league that can't guard perimeter players, can't rebound, and don't play very good defense. I mean, I think he's a fine offensive player, and I think he'll help teams there, but he doesn't do the other stuff well enough, I think, to be an all-star impact caliber player in the NBA. Like, his ceiling right now is John Collins, and he's not John Collins yet. And the Hawks have been trying to trade John Collins for a year and a half,
Yeah.
and they can't find a
Yeah.
trade for him. And
Oh,
that's what
that's
we hope
amazing.
Obi's going to be, right? So that's kind of where I'm at. I'd be fine shaking it up a little bit and consolidating and either getting future assets or trading maybe 3 guys for 1 better player if a team's looking for depth. I'm fine with that. That's cool. But I don't know what deal's going to open up. I'll tell you what I'm afraid of, that they're going to trade everyone for Karl Anthony Towns, and that's going to
Yeah,
be a
oof.
disaster. But I would not be
Do you think
shocked if
that's
that's
still
something that
realistic?
happens at some point because Minnesota's a mess. I'd much rather have their shooting guard if they trade him instead of Karl Anthony
Yeah.
Towns, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah.
But that's the type of deal I'm worried about, that they'll be, oh no, we missed out on Mitchell. Whoever the next guy is, even if he's not that good, we need to get him, and then they'll trade too much, and then we're going to be in a lot of trouble.
We'll be
What
the
about
Washington
Randle?
Wizards.
EJ, John, we have super chat from 007 Angelo. If we keep Randle, we say goodbye to Obi. That is probably the thing where there's the biggest timeline on that, or the shortest timeline right now to make a call.
Yeah, on Obi and Quickly, right? Because you're going to have to extend those guys and pay them at some point. They both become extension eligible this offseason. So you're going to have to decide, do you pay these guys, which then will clog your cap in 2025 when you get the salary cap jump and a bunch of guys are free agents? And I think you have to avoid that. You have to keep that year clear. So then what do you do? I think those are some very, very dicey decisions.
I think EJ, I think you wait until you absolutely have to make that decision. And I think we saw that with Randle and RJ. Maybe we could have waited that little bit more. And I think with Obi and Randle, you wait. His trade value ain't getting any worse. So maybe if there is a move, it opens up later. What do you think?
I think John kind of alluded to something that I think sometimes as Knicks fans, that if you're not taking like the macro view, like you're so into the Knicks world and Knicks scene that you sometimes forget that there are other teams in the conference. There are other teams in the league. And sometimes you're not just making a move to improve your team. You have to make moves relative to what's happening in the conference. So are you just going to make a move, a trade decision, just because it's going to get you up two positions into the 8th spot when, the Celtics will remain dominant for the next however many years, where Brooklyn has a window for the next 2 years? So for me, the decision isn't just based upon what happens with Obi's contract. It's not just about what happens with IQ's contract. It's also what's happening in the conference. I don't want to end up like the Washington Wizards. I don't want to end up being like the Atlanta Hawks, that theoretically should be a really good team, but seems to be somewhat of like those teams that are kind of like, I don't kind of get what's happening here. And I think that's what will ultimately decide how you make moves. Yes, there will be social media pressure. Yes, there'll be social media GMs that say, okay, do this, do this, do this, do this. But it has to be relative to what's happening across the league and what's happening within the conference. Otherwise, we'll be in the same position, just with more albatross contracts and with fewer draft picks.
And look, those teams you mentioned, they're stuck in the middle, and they've completely, sacked themselves of assets.
Yep.
Throw the Timberwolves into that mix too, right?
Absolutely.
They trade all their picks, and they're stuck.
They're
At least
stuck.
the Knicks, they're in like the middle ground, but they haven't sold out to get there, right?
Yeah.
There's a difference there, and you don't want to sell out and still be stuck there, which we talked about this in the offseason. We don't have to relitigate it, but that's why I was okay not doing the Mitchell trade. So I feel like you're getting to 47 wins or 48 wins, maybe 50. You're the 4 seed, and then where do you go? And it gets tough. It's hard. It's hard to build a championship team in the NBA. It's just really, really hard.
Oh, absolutely. I think Golden State got there because of shrewd drafting and pull off that big trade. I think there's a mixture of both. Everyone thinks you've got to tank fully to build that winner, and then you've got to trade for a big 3. It could be in between. You've just got to be smart with your assets and transactions. I'm positive, optimistic because Derrick Rose is expiring. Evan Fournier expires next season. So, like you said, they're not horrible contract. They were bad signings, I think, but at the moment they're not hamstringing us. So, John and EJ, what are your thoughts about the draft coming up, moving ahead this season now with the deadline and our picks? The Dallas selection is 11th right now, which is right on the borderline of coming to the Knicks. And Dallas look like they're struggling to improve. I really feel like the Knicks would prefer picks not to convey this season, just so they don't have to force their decision.
Yeah, and I have to look it up. How far do those Dallas protections last? When does that finally convert out of a first round pick? It's not for a while, right? They have a couple more years
Yeah,
before
I
that
think 1 or 2
turns
more
into a
years.
couple
Yeah,
twos.
yeah,
So yeah, I mean, it
yeah,
wouldn't be the worst thing in the world if it doesn't, convert this year. Washington's on the cusp too, right? I think Washington right now
yep,
has the 15th or 16th pick,
yep.
or actually, yeah, I think they have
15th,
the 15th or 16th pick, and
15th.
they're
Yeah,
top 14 protected, right?
yep.
So those two picks are kind of on the brink, and
Yeah.
then
On the
you have
brink.
the Detroit pick. That's not going to convey
Yep.
for a couple years now. So
Next year, I think.
yeah, I mean, I wouldn't mind one of those picks conveying this year, just so you have more ammo to try to trade up in the draft.
Yes.
So if you're
Mhm.
Yep.
sitting there and you have picks 12 and 13, and then you package, maybe one of your young players, or maybe, remember, they have too many young guys, right? Maybe you package two of
Yep.
your young players, and you can move 12, 13, OB, and something else, and you can get to 5, or you can get to 4, and you can get one. And this is supposed to be a really good draft class. I have not watched these
Yeah.
guys yet, so I'm not going to throw names out there because I just be, throwing darts at the
Yep.
wall.
We
But
will.
from people that I trust that have watched have told me, you can get a star player 6 or 7 deep in this draft class. So if you can get one of those picks and convey, and then try to trade up, and again, that's the consolidation that I was talking about before. Consolidate your assets into a player.
Hmm.
You mentioned how you can build in different ways, and you're right. But it's very hard to build if you don't draft a really good player at some point.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like,
That can
Yeah.
delay
it doesn't
you.
have to be in the top
Yep.
2 or 3 like Steph Curry or Giannis or Kawhi, but you got to find one somewhere. You can't just trade for everyone because you're going to run out of assets.
Hmm.
So I think the Knicks have to figure out a way to draft a difference-making player or somehow sign one just using free agent money. And I think that free agent thing won't happen until 2025. I don't think Knicks fans want to wait another 2.5 years to get there. I think that's a little too patient. So I think you're looking to try to trade up in the draft this year, and you hope one of those picks convey. And I think Dallas will finish out of the bottom 10 of the league,
Yeah.
to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I think Luke is good enough. And I think they'll probably make a trade to try to, get a boost a little bit. And hopefully they
Let's hope
can then
Kemba.
consolidate some of that stuff to target a specific player that they think can be a star, and they go and they get him. They tried to do it last year with Jaden Ivey. They made an honest shot. They tried to give everything up to get him multiple times,
Yeah.
even
Oh,
after
yeah.
he was traded to Detroit, but they couldn't. And I think they'll try to do it again next year.
Yeah.
Great
And
points.
and I think definitely like the difference between this year's draft and last year's draft is there was uncertainty with the what was going to happen with Donovan Mitchell. There was a lot of uncertainty because of where the league was in terms of the trading season. Um, Big difference will be you kind of have more clarity because Donovan Mitchell will be off the board for this coming off season. So there's a lot more clarity in terms of how you can position those slots. I will continue to emphasize this point over and over again. The roster we went into this season with felt like an incomplete roster because of how many moves seem to be just hanging in the air because of the Kevin Durant fiasco, because of Kyrie, because of Rudy Gobert, because of Donovan Mitchell. It felt like many teams weren't able to really complete their rosters before the start of the season. I don't think that we'll have that same sort of impediment at the end of the season moving into free agency. So there'll be a lot more clarity to draft with an understanding of here's where we want our team to be for the 2023-2024 season.
Let me throw. I just saw a chat come up. I missed who put it up there. He goes, "Oh, you good luck drafting somebody high with Thibs here and developing that player." Emmanuel Quickly's playing. Quentin Grimes is playing. Mitchell Robinson's playing. RJ Barrett is playing. I hate to break it to Knick fans. Tom Thibodeau has developed young players better than any Knick head coach during my lifetime. I've been alive for 40 freaking years. He has developed young players better than any Knick coach since I've been alive. Alive. You go back to Pat Riley and Van Gundy. What young players are they developing those years? Walter McCarty, John Wallach, Charlie. I'm serious. Who are these like Frank Williams, Marty Collins,
Oof.
Nate
Wow.
Robinson? I mean, who are these young guys that have been developed? Tom Thibodeau and this staff have done an excellent job developing young players. Obi Toppin's developed the jump shot. Emmanuel Quickly's become a much better defender and a better point guard. Cam Reddish is playing the best basketball of his career. Who am I missing?
I'll tell you what the
Quentin Grimes has become a very good player. I
I'll
mean,
tell you what the issue is,
haven't
though.
you developed young players pretty well, or am I crazy?
They are developing, but they're not developing. I think they're role players first, which is
Yeah,
a whole other issue. They've been drafted late in the first round, and you can't really expect.
Bingo.
You can only
no.
expect so much from a player drafted 25th. You know, it's up to this front office to get us in a great position to land that Benedict Mathurin, Jaden Ivey. You know.
No, you're right, and that's
Relative.
why. Yeah, go ahead. I'm
Mm.
sorry, AJ. Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry, John. I was going to say too, also relative to having a superstar or elite talent. So when you have a player like Carmelo and you're drafting in the teens, late teens, or in 20s, that role player will look better. When you have Patrick Ewing, who's a top 50, top 75 talent, Charlie Ward looks a heck of a lot better,
Right.
you know? And I'm not dismissing Charlie Ward's career, but when you have that superstar talent, that elite talent in the NBA, it makes other players look better. We haven't had that talent since Melo left.
And look, none of the
Yep.
guys, and CT, you made this point.
Mm.
Nobody on this roster has superstar natural ability, except
No,
maybe Cam
they're
Reddish.
playing their
Like
role.
if you take just take Cam Reddish's physical traits, size, length, athleticism,
Yep.
maybe he has elite upside at some point, but he's so far away from that, it's hard to predict that. But look, RJ is not an A+ athlete. You know, Quickly's not an A+ athlete. Grimes is not an A+ athlete. You know, Obi Toppin, as he's a good leaper, but he's lacking other things that you need to be a great player, right? So I think they've done the best they can with the guys they've picked where they've picked them.
Yeah, they're a supporting cast. That's why they signed Jalen Brunson, free agent. They're looking at those guys. They tried to trade for Donovan Mitchell. They're trying to establish the core to be a veteran signing free agent, and they're trying to supplement that with a supporting cast with the draft pieces, I think, so far. But John, yeah, any final thoughts? I appreciate your time.
Yeah, and I think Knicks fans just have to continue to be patient. I know they don't want to hear that, and we've been patient for a long
Yeah,
time, and we all want to see a winner. But I think you have to be realistic with your expectations and, you know, focus on the young guys getting better. You know, don't freak out if a guy plays 24 minutes and you want him to play 29 minutes. Don't let that ruin your night, that he played 5 fewer minutes than you wanted him to. It's not that big of a deal. Um, and just hope the young guys continue to get better. And if you want to fire the head coach, that's fine. And might you see some things change? Yes. But guys, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, unless you're bringing in Eric Spoelstra, and by the way, you're not, this is not going to just turn into a 50-win team overnight by changing the head coach. It's not going to happen. Might you do things that you like a little bit better? Sure. But it's not going to be this wild transformation into a contending team. They don't have the horses for that. And it
Mm.
stinks that they don't, but they don't. And look, the rest of the year, I think you guys made a good point before. Keep an eye on the young guys. You hope RJ breaks through, becomes more consistent, plays better defense. You know, maybe you can find the trade. Again, you consolidate some of the youngsters as you move forward here.
yeah,
And then this offseason in the draft is very important. Lottery night, if they don't make the play-in, which, you know, I think they'll probably be the 9th or the 10th seed based on what the standings look like now. I think the Pacers will drop off a little bit, right?
yeah.
And, you know, teams like that. Or if they finish out of it, you know, maybe you get lucky and you move up in the lottery for the first time since Patrick Ewing, which is amazing. 30 years, but whatever, it
Oh,
is what it
I'll
is.
be
Well, I'm
there
sorry,
celebrating.
40 years. Let me redo my math. But look, it's going to be really important because you're not going to be a big player in free agency, though they're mid-level exception, I think, this year, right? But you're not going to, I don't think, do a ton with that because of the salary cap again in 2025. So it's going to be another trade, draft, wait for the star player you want to become available. Hope it's not Karl Anthony Towns. You hope it's a, you know, Joel Embiid maybe, or what they really need is that versatile 6'8", 6'9" wing that can play the 3 or the 4 and be a versatile scorer and defender. They don't have that guy unless Cam Reddish can become that guy. You know, they don't have a Paul George. They don't have a Kawhi Leonard. They don't have that type of versatile wing that I think most of the great teams have in some way, shape, or form. So that's what it's going to be. But, guys, I think, quite frankly, and I'll end you with this team's kind of fun to watch. I know it's frustrating and stuff. It's some of the best offense I've seen as a Knicks fan. Like, I find this offense more enjoyable than when they had Melo, right? Except maybe the 1 year when they led the league in threes. That
Yeah.
was fun with Novak and all those
Novak,
guys.
yeah. Yeah.
Otherwise, this is probably the best offense I've seen since I've been, I mean, my God. It's not like when they were good in the 90s, their offense was any good anyway. This is some of the best offensive
Yeah.
basketball I've seen as a Knicks fan. Jalen Brunson is the best point guard I've seen as a Knicks fan since, again, Derek
Yep.
Harper's 20-something years, guys. So enjoy it. Have some fun. They're playing close against good teams. It stinks they're not winning. I get it. But enjoy the ride a little bit, and don't let the little things bother you, because in the end, Quickly playing 24 minutes, we wanted to play him 29, and Derrick Rose playing 7 minutes. Don't let that ruin your fun, and enjoy the team, and just hope that they can, turn this into something down the road.
Yep. No, wise thoughts. Let's watch out. Let's continue this conversation, John. It's amazing catching up, and let's link up maybe at the All-Star break or leading into the halfway point, and we'll see where things
Sure.
are at.
Sounds good, boys. Enjoy it. Always fun coming on.
Yep. Appreciate you.
Thanks, John.
John SCHMEELK, ladies and gentlemen. Appreciate his thoughts. EJ, let's go.
Let's do it, man.
Yeah. What did you take from John's wise thoughts? I guess we've been seeing some great performances from some of the young players, but some frustrations with these close losses, recently.
Yeah, I'm going to emphasize some of the points that John mentioned. And again, shout out to John. John, let us know who you think is going to be Giants or Commanders this Sunday. But the fact that we have so many young players playing, that's a win. And I have to emphasize it again, guys. Like, for Knicks Nation, the fact that we can have guys, here's another win. And again, this is where we have to be honest and rational. We've seen Obi and Randle play in spots together.
Yep.
That's big. We've seen Derrick Rose play games where he's only playing 5-6 minutes. That's big.
That's big.
That's huge for Tom Thibodeau to say, okay, he's playing 5-6 minutes. For Evan Fournier, sorry. for Evan Fournier to be, Rick Brunson, same thing, right? For Evan Fournier to have games where he's a DNP in that blowout win the other night, and Evan Fournier is the only man to not come off the bench. That says something. And I think that's one of the points that John SCHMEELK made, is that if we're upset, and again, there's a difference between being upset and being frustrated. You can be frustrated with the fact that they're not better, but you can't be upset that they are exactly what they are. They're exactly what we predicted them to be. I can't think of any podcast host, or this show, especially this show, which CT takes a lot of pride in terms of curating this product, and I enjoy being part of this team. We've never had anyone on this program said that they were going to be a top 4 team in the East, that they were going to win any more than, I think the highest we got was 44 wins. And that's right about 500. So I think that's the takeaway, is that they are exactly what they are. They're an average team, and average teams are infuriating. They're frustrating because they have just enough talent to hang in there, but not enough talent to get over the edge. They don't have enough talent to overcome silly mistakes. They don't have enough talent to just show up to the gym and say, okay, we're going to not play defense for the first 3 quarters and then turn it on, a la Golden State. They can't decide, okay, we're going to get suspended for 6 games and I'll play now, and then turn it on. It's not this team.
Yeah, you're right, about the focus, and all the projections have been very accurate. Give or take, a couple of nice wins come from behind, a couple of gifted wins as well, with stars missing. But that's just the season. It's going to even out 82 games. The thing is, I've always said this too, EJ, at the start of the season, the Knicks team will finish better than they start. Like, most teams don't start really hot, with the average talent. It takes games to build up into a rhythm, into a groove, get familiar with each other, start to really hit their straps at the deadline point of view as well. So the Knicks are 2 games below 500, but I think most fans' frustrations have been, okay, this is where we are. We expected this, EJ. How can we get better? Where can we go from here?
Yeah.
how are we going to get better? Those kind of questions, keep the Knicks fan base on edge.
Yeah.
We've seen the same things from Randle. We see RJ with minimal improvements, and it's just like we want to fast forward to get to a better product.
Yeah. Listen, I said this earlier on the show. Um, the low hanging fruit, I think Tariq said this. Shout out to Tariq. Um, I think Tariq said this earlier that aiming bullets at Thibodeau is low hanging fruit. It's easy. But the more I watch basketball, the more I fall in love with basketball. The best players in the league, their games evolve, they adapt because you can see the player thinking and growing and saying, okay, I have to work on this. Like, for example, LeBron's 3-point shot, he'll never be confused for Larry Bird. He'll never be confused for that. Like, it'll never happen. But you could see, if you look at the trajectory of his career, you could see that LeBron one day was like, all right, I need to get into the lab and really grow my outside shot to become more of a potential threat outside. That's someone who, like, in the middle of a game, you can see him thinking. And that's basketball isn't just a physical sport, it's a thinking sport.
Yep,
And that's the
that's
piece
right.
of it where sometimes, you know, if you have players on your team who don't think or who are not necessarily like instinctively thinking about what are my options here, or they just revert to their worst tendencies, that sometimes isn't a coaching issue. That's just what the player is, and you just have to accept that. Um, and that's what's sometimes hard as a fan is that you want for there to be something that can be done to make all of these players to unleash. Maybe it's because we've seen way too many Mighty Ducks movies. We've seen way too
Yeah.
many Rocky movies where it's
Any
like
given
it's
Sunday.
any given there's just one small talk. If we just have this one conversation, if we just have this one little thing that they watch, it'll unlock like the fullest potential and they'll be world beaters. Sometimes that's not what happens in life. That's not what really happens in sports. That's not what happens in history. Maybe that's just what the player is, and that's what we're dealing with. That's the reality we're facing. And it doesn't mean that we're going to be
Yeah.
like this forever, but for this season, it is
Yeah,
what it is.
I think it's a culmination of everything. Like us Nick fans, it's just not just in the last 2 years. Like we have to keep in consideration most of us fans, and they've been highlighting in the best chat in the biz how long they've been a passionate Nick fan. Most
Yeah,
fans have been 30 years, like us, 40, 50,
yeah.
60, 70. So shout out to everyone out here. And I think it's just a culmination of that, getting so close and then having to peel it back. But
Yeah.
that's just sport. And John hit the money. In the NBA, it's so hard to win. Look at teams with great stars, all stars, but they still can't get over the hump.
Yeah.
CP3 hasn't even won a ring yet.
Yeah.
Devin Booker got awfully close. I mean, Giannis, they had to get Drew Holiday just to get them over the top. Giannis and Middleton wasn't enough by themselves. I mean, if that isn't further evidence that we just need to be patient and just keep building, signing young talent, developing, and then just, you need a little bit of luck as
Yeah.
well.
Yo, bro. I mean, if this was something that I wanted to talk about too, and like I hope we can like really expound upon this as much too. You as and CT and I we chat offline. There are teams I think that would be really envious of being in the Knicks position. And that sounds
Yeah.
crazy to say that.
Oh,
I know it sounds crazy to say that, guys, because I do get frustrated when I'm watching these games. But there are teams like, for example, Chicago. Would you rather be in our position right now or Chicago's position right now?
else, 100%.
You know what I'm saying? Like
Yep,
they
that's a good
had
point.
that like one quasi like breakout season. But right now, if you are a Knicks fan, would you rather be in Chicago's position or New York's position? Would you rather be in Charlotte's position or our position?
Else.
You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
That's just a
And that
couple of teams though. We need to
that's
climb a
couple.
huge mountain. Yeah, I guess some fans were upset about the DeJounte Murray thing as well because Atlanta's got better. Cleveland's got better as well. But we are
But
we are missing that guy to complement, Brunson, and we're sort of looking at how can we get that guy.
yeah, but I think that's the struggle is that Atlanta got better, but did they get good enough to be in championship contender?
They're going to struggle, yeah, because it's a mighty tall mountain to climb, I think, and they don't have the draft picks we have. But yeah, that's a huge. That's why I don't think this has been the worst regime, front office regime. No way. Phil Jackson was worse.
By
But having
far.
said that, with all these assets, they could still hit a home run, or they could absolutely blow it.
Yes.
And with these picks, they're a ticking grenade, and they need to be used before, they expire. And that's going to be the legacy of this front office. They haven't been the worst, but they've been basically, in baseball, they've been punting,
Hmm.
bunting.
But CC, like I think that's part of like where, at least I feel like my maturation as a basketball fan comes from that. It's like understanding how the team is faring and being passionate, but also understanding their direction relative to the way the rest of the conference and the league is. So, what GM has been perfect
Yeah,
with regards to their resume?
isn't it?
Like
Yeah, you're
there's
right.
no,
Yep.
like for as much as we like have fanfare for Danny Ainge and what he did in Boston, there were some really like moves.
Yeah,
Um, Yeah, and
facts.
that's, as much as we laud the process in Philadelphia, again, do we need to go back to Markelle Fultz? When we talk about, uh, again, going to Atlanta, uh, that John Collins deal and the money there, that's a contract that they've been trying to offload. When we go to Chicago
Mm,
and, how much their offseason a couple of years ago was lauded, they're not in the most enviable of positions at this point. So, you can't just look, and I love watching MSG. I love watching the Knicks. I love consuming Knicks content, but it also has to be relative to what's happening in the rest of the league, the rest of the conference. It's the same reason why my favorite player all time, Patrick Ewing, yes, the league and historians recognize him as one of the greatest players to ever lace up, basketball shoes. But he also had to face Michael Jordan. That was
absolutely.
just the
Yeah.
reality of history. And
Yep.
Hakeem Olajuwon.
Yep. I guess that's what separates, elite front offices and normal front offices and things like that. Sam Presti gets so much love,
Yeah.
adoration. But a lot of people could press the button with that many assets. We could sit in the control room and press certain buttons. Um, he's drafted pretty well, so that's a skill. But what are your thoughts? Does it come down to how many people are in this front office? Like, we keep asking this question, EJ. What is the role of Scott Perry? What is the role of a Brock Aller? What is the
Mhm.
role of a Walt Perrin? Who's controlling the draft? Who's controlling decisions? How often do they get to pitch their ideas to Leon? A guy is just sitting in the back room shouting, and then they get ignored. Um, it's funny, because James Dolan, there was that talk about Ian Begley's report. After the Oklahoma loss, the
Mhm.
scrutiny has heightened. Does he pull the rug under somebody? It may not be the guy at the top, but maybe some changes happen.
You know what? I'm someone who love, as part of my day job, I love looking at systems. And here's something that if you study history, that's really important. A lack of transparency or a lack of clarity works best for those in power. So because we don't know a lot about who has what role, that actually works really well, not for us as fans because we don't know who's making what decisions, but that works fantastic for Leon Rose. If he needs some kind of public cover, he can always have a fall guy because there isn't that public transparency. We don't know
Yep.
who's running the moves. We don't know who's making the phone calls. We don't know who's responsible for this or for that. So
Right.
that lack of transparency is great for Leon Rose. Lack of transparency always works best for those in power. So if I'm Leon Rose, you can use that approach, which he's using right now, which is you don't know who does what. There are like 15 guys. We don't know who has what role. Because I trust people more, though, I think a lot of the conversation, a lot of the heated conversation we see in the Knicks Twitter space or social media space, you would kind of lessen it if the Knicks were more transparent.
Yes,
If
that's key.
they would have more trust from fans. A lot of the reason why Knicks social media is so hot is because the Knicks front office never says anything. So it allows for us to exist in this world of conjecture and theory and conspiracy theory and thoughts and wild accusations. If the front office were more public, like Sam Presti, like guys, let's think about it. How many championships has Sam Presti won?
0.
The reason why he's able to keep his job, aside from the fact that he's drafted well, is that he's also a public face that's curried a lot of favor with the fan base and with the media. I don't know if that's a Leon Rose thing. I don't know if it's a Dolan thing, but that creates mistrust. And so that's kind of why when you ask the question, who does what, the deeper question is why is there such a lack of transparency? And does it really, at the end of the day, benefit them? In some ways, it does benefit Leon Rose, but it also hurts the Knicks organization.
Yeah, you make great points, and I'll add this about Sam Presti too. I believe this front offices are judged also who preceded them, because it's a family tree. Yeah, it's a tree branch. So Sam Presti, OKC, they had Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook, James Harden, that netted them assets, that those assets branched out onto trees to help them be in this position. The Knicks never had, that situation. We're building from an absolute clean, construction site with no equipment, no tools, no nothing, and we've slowly been gathering whatever assets we have to try to get to a situation. We did the LeBron sweepstakes. We flamed out.
Yeah.
Then we try to sign a few veterans, and then we have to rebuild again and again and again. Whereas I think that gets lost. A lot of these franchises get looked at like, oh man, they're doing so well. They've got they're doing great moves, but they've had so many assets. Like Golden State had those draft picks, and drafted Steph Curry, and that. But I will say this: where the Knicks have messed up and has ultimately got us in this, middle of the road pack, was the Kevin Knox and the Frank Ntilikina drafts.
Yeah.
If you hit on one of those, you hit on Mikal Bridges, Miles Bridges, although, that's a different story. SGA, it's not the Obi one, it's the two before that. The Knicks would be further along in their growth. That's why you can't afford to miss on 2 drafts in a row. That's going to set your franchise back.
Yeah, particularly top 10.
Yeah.
And that's where, again, you have to look at things within the context of, like you said, you have to look at it within the greater context. It's not as if, once the Steve Mills administration was over, or the Phil Jackson administration was over, like the NBA, the league office said, okay, finally, we have someone who may be competent. We're going to wipe out all these contracts. We're going to, redo the drafts. Shout out to you, Tariq. But you have to deal with the canvas that existed before. So again, and I know it's sometimes annoying because you just want the quick fix, but that's not how sports works. Especially in a salary capped sport like basketball.
Yeah, that's everything, right? And even if you do make a bad signing, your hope is that the value ain't so bad that you can make moves and get out of that. I think one of the reasons why the Dallas Mavericks and the Knicks are in this situation they're in is because big signings haven't really lived up to what the signing meant to the franchise. Like Kristaps Porzingis, they traded for him, it didn't work out. They had to get Spencer Dinwiddie and Davis Bertans, so that KP's playing well now, so that didn't net them a positive from that transaction. The Knicks went all in on KD, Kyrie. We went in on LeBron. We just been left at the altar in terms of our strategy with free agency. Whereas I think if we'd just been more patient, peeled it back at the draft and try to hit on some of these picks, we would have been nice. I mean, we all know how close it is, EJ. It's inches away. If we got Ivy, if we got Benedict Mathurin, that can push your franchise forward. We've been hitting really decent on these back end picks, but it's time to then get into the top 12 and nail a potential all-star.
Yeah, and also let's also be exist in the world of the accurate zeitgeist or the accurate history of the time. It's great that we didn't land KD and Kyrie.
Oh. bless
in
him,
an
dodged a
in it,
bullet.
yeah, in an alternate universe, like the stuff that was happening in Brooklyn earlier this season, if it were happening in New York, I hate to say it because I was hoping we got KD as well too, but imagine how much more of a laughing stock the team would be. Imagine what that would mean in terms of what happens. Because remember, Brooklyn's window is perhaps 1 to 2 more years. So how much more of a laughing stock does the Knicks? How much more of a laughing stock do the Knicks become? And how much of a reputable landing spot does it become for the next free agent class? We don't know what's going to happen with Brooklyn in the next couple of years. And think about how
Uh,
sensational all the headlines were. So in
Yep.
as much like I think part of it, and this is again where we have to be truly, truly critical, is there have been some wins by this front office. There's been some luck. There's been some mistakes. But I think the big issue is making sure that whatever Dolan decides is that it's a clear culture that will be consistent for 5, 6, 7 years. You can't do this in 2 years. You can't do it in
No.
3 years. I'm sorry, Giannis is going to be great. And we saw Giannis the other day. My gosh, that is superstar talent. That's not going to be diminished in the next 2, 3 years. So you can't just say, okay, we're going to trade for Donovan Mitchell and Donovan Mitchell's going to cover Giannis. Like you have to plan according to what the reality is at that time and what it might be once you see the league change.
Yeah. Yeah. Great points, EJ. Yeah, chat's absolutely buzzing out here. Friday night, the feeling is right. We're heading in. We'll break down the games coming up. It's been a great show so far. Had John Schmelk got these wise thoughts about this situation, and we're only a quarter way into this season, but there's so many talking points.
Yep.
Um, I guess front offices. There's a big difference between elite ones and not just average ones, and then bad ones. Um, with drafting, it's a lot about scouting. I will say that.
Hmm.
There's a salary cap for your roster and players. The New York Knicks are one of the richest organizations in terms of revenue and all of that. They could, and they are spending. We know James Dolan ain't cheap, yeah, but is he spending the money wisely? I want to hear people's thoughts. Is he spending it in the right departments? There's all these dudes in the front office with conflicting uh, theories and philosophies as well. They're all conflicting. Brock Aller is about asset consolidation and building slower, and William Wesley and that was brought in to try to move things faster along, I think. And I think that's a big thing that the Knicks could improve on. We could spend as much money as we like, right? We shouldn't be whiffing on star talent like SGA,
Hmm.
dudes in the draft that were there in the Knicks grass. We don't need to go back and hope we could have traded up or hope that this team traded Donovan Mitchell to us. The Knicks could have drafted these players and they missed on them.
Yeah. Yeah. And what you said earlier too is that missing on Donovan Mitchell the first time and then having to trade for him later, that's this administration trying to compensate for the sins of a previous administration. You know, missing on SGA, like again, and that's what I mean. Like you have to remember things from the context of it wasn't the same GM, it wasn't the same president. It was like again, these are decisions and moves. Like you inherit some of these decisions, and if we're going to be honest and critical, I mean, there's one thing to be critical. It's another thing to be honestly critical. Um,
Yep.
you have to remember who was in charge, and also you have to remember that once we got through like the Heatles and the Miami Heat, I think James Dolan still hadn't at that point. By the time that LeBron had gone back to Cleveland, I think Dolan, from the evidence that we have, because he doesn't really talk a lot, but like from that interview that he had on the Michael Kay show, the summer that Katie and Kyrie were available,
Yep.
his mindset was still big three,
Oh yeah.
even though the league seemed to have been changing at that point. The league was changing. The philosophy of teams was changing at that point. The idea of having a big three that worked really well in Miami, that philosophy was already changing. And he was still holding on to that model. So, in part, that informed the philosophies of those administrations, like the Phil Jackson administration, or for a certain time, like the Glenn Grunwald or Steve Mills. So if you're Leon Rose and your owner, the team owner, it's taken him some time to like kind of get up to speed to realize the nature of the league has changed, and you have been aware of it. You're playing catch up. You have to, because he's only empowered in as much as James Dolan allows him to create a new team and organizational philosophy. And that's the thing. Like, we've all been basketball fans for a while. The way teams are winning now isn't the way that they were organizing themselves 10, 15 years ago. And that was just like that 10 years ago. LeBron signed with Miami in July of 2010. That was just 12 years ago. The league has changed drastically in just 12 years.
Yeah, amazing point. And we're witnessing a new wave, ladies and gentlemen, like the LeBron CPs and, the Melo's out of the league, and, that wave's finished. It's the Giannis and Devin Bookers and those kind of guys. I guess Steph Curry, that era is the last to probably come to an end. Golden State, I don't see them winning the title this year. You never write off a champion, but where they are right now, it's a hell of a climb to come back from. But yeah, I think the Knicks are positioning themselves in a nice spot with this new wave coming in with the assets. I guess a lot of fans are on edge about who's this next star. Then we don't want Cat, we don't want Booker's not going to be available. Luka, what's happening there? What are your thoughts on, like, put your crystal ball on again? And I love seeing this. Why is EJ? Pick a year that the Knicks win their next championship. Is it in our lifetime? And is there any players currently in the NBA, players that help us get there?
I think that's the challenge. And I've actually, what's funny is, like, I was watching the game, when was it, Wednesday night? And I was thinking that question to myself, like, who is the next superstar that might become available? But then the other thing I thought to myself is, well, is that even the model? Like, is that even the model of trading for a superstar to win a championship? Because I think the last player where you can say that was the bedrock, and chat, you can correct me if I'm wrong, the last player who was traded for who became the bedrock of a championship team was Kawhi. But
the last star, I think
the last
Holiday
star
was that, like, sort of that complementary piece.
Yeah, exactly, the complementary piece. So for me, that's where I was like, wait, is Kawhi the rule or Kawhi the exception? Where you have to really draft the player. And that's where, like, I understand.
The Golden State one was really unique because they had Steph injured and then they tanked. That was we'll probably never see that ever again.
No, to hit on three big ones. So I think that's the conundrum, is that I think the Knicks are trying to do both at the same time, like trade for a major piece, but also draft a major piece. That's where it's like, I don't know. I think it has to probably be you draft. And it doesn't necessarily mean you have to tank. I don't think you have to tank, because I think Giannis is, like, proof of that. Draymond Green, to the extent that we believe he's an uber elite player, top 30, top 40, you don't necessarily have to do that. I mean, because go back to Manu Ginobili, but you do have to at some point get lucky to get that player. And then it'll be clearer in terms of when the Knicks might win a championship. But without that player in a controllable contract, I don't even know when.
Yeah, that's the answer. No one really knows. So then, what's the correct answer? The sooner we be real with ourselves, with where we're at, and we peel it back, or we play the long game, that the sooner we will get to a championship. We don't know what year, we don't know when. We don't know which player is going to be on the team, but at the soonest we be real with ourselves and start from the foundation to get there, the sooner we'll win that chip. I think the longer we try to, stay relevant, or, sign players that may not may not get us there. I think that's just going to prolong things, unfortunately. You know,
Yeah.
it's going to be tough. You know, these next young teams are coming up, 2, 3, 4 years when the veterans are turning a new leaf. These young teams will be stepping up. I mean, Orlando looked nice with Paolo. Indiana's backcourt has just transformed their franchise in a matter of half a season, quarter of a
Yeah.
season.
Yeah.
Houston Rockets are strapped in with heaps of assets. You know, Jalen Green, a couple of dudes. You know, I like where the Knicks are at, but yeah, we've got work to do, serious work with these picks.
Bro, the Lakers.
Yeah,
The Lakers are a cautionary tale. The Lakers are a cautionary tale. The Lakers are a warning. They're a symbol of what not to do.
yep,
And I think that's when again, I'm watching way more basketball now. And you start to realize, like, yes, we want to win quickly. Yes, we want to have the excitement of um of what it would be like to have an electric garden. And by the way, remind me, I do have a hot take about the garden, the Milwaukee
oh
game.
yeah,
I'm gonna get into trouble when I say this, but it is what it is. Um, but the Lakers are,
unfiltered.
yeah, it's Friday night. You know, I don't have anything in my cup of water more than nice, um, but yeah, the Lakers are a cautionary tale. Like when you are chasing a championship and you trade away asset after asset after asset and you win yeah, I don't know. Yeah, there has to be a it's difficult, but there has to be that level of patience where you're
They,
not going to end up in the
yeah,
position of the Lakers.
they kind of did what they had to though, and I think that's similar with the Knicks when Randle became like, you know, I heard someone make a great take about the fourth seed, which is
Hmm.
in hindsight set, you know, maybe not the best thing for us, but where we were at when Randle became All NBA, most improved, and that. Yes, we could have waited, I guess, but then that would have brought new risks. Let's say if he backed it up and became an all-star again, then we're
Yeah,
looking at $200 million
yeah,
with that situation. So hindsight's like easy to go back. I think the Lakers, you know, when you have that generational guy, LeBron, it's kind of like you look back and maybe regret if you don't try to go all in again and give him everything you need because he's once in a generation. And I guess the Knicks were in a similar position with Patrick Ewing at the end of his career, and we
yeah.
decided to,
2000.
you know, to not. Yeah, he still had that mindset that he was a big piece and a big star, and you know, and wanted a new contract, and the Knicks just decided not to. Um, you know, so yeah, organizations can unfortunately find themselves in positions where, you know, there's relationships that they've got to upkeep and things like that. I guess it's a business. Sometimes you got to be ruthless.
Hmm.
You've just got to
Hmm.
say, hey, like I honestly believe now the Lakers is the time to be ruthless. Like trade AD, trade LeBron. There's no reason to be delusional this season and try to trade 2 first round picks and Austin Reeves
Yeah,
Just to get DeMar DeRozan or something. Like that's that's digging a deeper hole for them.
and that's the crazy thing about the NBA is like when you're in that hole, and that's why like I raised the question earlier. I posed the question earlier, like, would you rather be the Knicks or Chicago? Would you rather be the Knicks? I'll even would you rather this is gonna sound crazy, but you know, and people in the chat, like I really want you guys to think about this critically. Would you rather be the Knicks or the Lakers right now? It sounds crazy, you know, like because obviously LeBron is LeBron and 80 is 80, and I'm about to sneeze. Hold on one second.
Yeah, you good?
Um, but there's something about the flexibility of improvement. Um, the Lakers are in this really awkward position where they are hamstrung to improve, but they have to go for it. And so like that's what
Yeah.
I'm saying, like measuring where we are, not just like relative to like other teams like the 93 team, the 94 team, the 99 team, but also measuring us relative to where other teams in the league are as well.
Mm,
The Lakers have some really difficult questions to answer. Dallas,
really
what
difficult.
what is Dallas going like? Dallas has to keep their superstar happy.
Yeah.
And what moves can they make to keep Luca happy?
Yeah.
Charlotte.
That's that's another situation where you could you could acquire a difference-making player at the wrong time.
Yep.
You wanna acquire that difference maker when you've got great parts or assets coming your way, and then you can supplement. If you acquire that star talent first, and then you're too good to be during their tenure, you're too good to add more talent around them. You're going to be a
Hmm.
Dallas, you're going to be a Chicago, you're going to be stuck. And I've got a great example to make about San Antonio Spurs, ladies and gentlemen. A lot of bewilderment why they got out of DeJounte Murray. People were like, why did they do that? He's a nice young piece. Like, they've got to pay him, kind of thing. But if you peel it back now, you're like, was San Antonio just being smart? Were they just real with where they're at and say,
Mm,
hey, we've got to pay him, but he's not quite on our timeline. Let's see whatever we can get for him, and we just keep building.
mm.
Was that? Well, San Antonio, they've got a winning pedigree. Were they just real with themselves, knowing where they're at in the West, and is that why they traded him?
And getting good value for him, especially because that market, I will go back to it. I keep on going back to it. The inflated trade market of the NBA of the 2022 offseason.
Oh, Rudy
And
Gobert, and
Rudy,
he's barely a difference maker right now. I mean, they got torched by KP, Rudy Gobert, and Cat.
I listen. Because of CT's hard work, we get some really great guests on this program. Um, but I just want my credit for calling out the Rudy
Yeah,
Gobert trade the entire offseason. Every time I was on, I want the record to show. I kept on saying, why did they trade so many pieces for Rudy Gobert and inflated the market? It made and I heard so few basketball analysts ponder that question and even look at, okay, who were the competing teams for Rudy Gobert? Like what was the actual market aside from Minnesota? And so if you're Minnesota right now, how does that trade feel?
that
What's the
was
resale value on Rudy Gobert?
that's where a good GM like Danny Ainge, president, does his work. I guess he got a really good deal from the Cavs. He got a really good deal for Gobert, and look at where the Jazz are positioned now. Incredible picks, great young talent
Absolutely.
again. So yeah, that's a classic example of using two players that you don't have a part of your future anymore and recycling them for the next thing. Um, but yeah, in terms of the Knicks situation right now, we just need to be more realistic with where we're at, give more minutes to these young players and develop them, make that hard decision with Randle and Obi and Randle and Rose. And there are tough decisions you've got to make. You mentioned Kawhi, and that's a great point, EJ, about DeMar DeRozan. Toronto had to make that call to
Mm-hmm.
trade one of their favorite sons
Yep.
to to get Kawhi in there. So they made that tough decision.
And you know what? I think one of the last ones I was on, someone asked the question like, why would you want your players to play well to trade them? I didn't necessarily say to trade them, but
Mm,
so that they can be tradable. The worst thing that you can have on your team is for you to have players that are untradeable. So, for example, Evan Fournier right now, can his value get any lower? And so, what ends up happening is that you just have a contract that's sitting on the books. You have a player who, thankfully, Evan Fournier seems to be a real professional, a real pro, a real team player, where he's not disgruntled, he's not going to be an
mm,
agitator, he's not going to cause issues in the locker room. So much that we know.
yeah,
But you want players that, if and when possible, their value is high enough so that you can leverage that deal, you can leverage that player's contract, you can leverage that player into better assets. So, whether it's Julius, whether it's RJ, and one of the things that you hear analysts talk about all the time, or beat writers talk about all the time, is that almost any player is tradable in the league. Almost every player is tradable in the league. And you want that because it then lessens what you have to provide in terms of assets. One of the reasons why, like, we couldn't make the Donovan Mitchell deal, depending on who you listen to, is it wasn't really clear what RJ was. It wasn't really clear what
Yeah.
Q dot was. It wasn't really
Yep.
Q what IQ was. It really wasn't clear what OB was. But you do want them to be better players because then it lessens the blow if and when that next player becomes available. Um,
Yeah, facts. That's an amazing point. We could also reference, remember Kevin Knox, his value dipped
yeah,
because we signed Mook Morris.
yeah,
Knox's rookie year was exceptional. RJ's rookie year was pretty decent. I mean, that's where we got stuck. Really, we're trying to sign a few veterans with Steve Mills to make the playoffs. If we had been real with ourselves 3 years ago before the pandemic season and developed those guys a bit more, maybe their value would have been a bit higher. Not saying they would have been stars or anything, but
hmm
players can go in all different directions. Look at Dennis Smith Jr. now.
yeah,
He's like come full circle.
absolutely,
Players can not fit in a place, and then they can fit in.
yeah.
Like you made your great point. You've got to nourish your assets so that teams around the league know who they are, and let their skill sets grow. Let them shine.
Yeah, and the other thing too, and I have to remind myself of this all the time as well too, is I've been watching basketball for a very, very long time. Again, like I said, my favorite player was Patrick Ewing. I love John Starks. I love those '90s teams. But basketball is different. Basketball is absolutely different of a sport. The business of basketball is absolutely different. The metrics
Huge.
in terms of how we evaluate players today versus how we evaluated them 30 years ago is incredibly different. So one of the key points that we have to remember is that when I first started introduced to basketball, Patrick Ewing was a 4-year player. Uh, you know, Tim Duncan was a 4-year player out of Wake Forest. Uh, a lot of these players, whether it's the Dennis Smith Jr., are coming into the league. They're coming to the league with what at 18, 19, and so
Yeah.
their maturation, not just like their physical maturation, takes longer than it did 2 generations ago, but their mental maturation, their emotional maturation. And a lot of the players are competing with things that Patrick Ewing and John Starks and Derek Harper and Mark Jackson never had to compete with. The emotional stress of constant social media and the birth and the deluge of podcast and social media content that's criticizing them. And like you have to be a part of it in the social media economy. But at the same time, like, if you are RJ, you're probably fully aware of what Knicks Buzz is saying and the 15,000 other Knicks content providers, you know. But at the same time, you have to be part of that world. So um,
Yeah.
there is something about like this is a different generation of players that have to deal with a different reality and pressures that players of Charles Barkley, Jordan, the original dream team of players of that ilk didn't necessarily have to deal with. Not saying one is better or one is worse, but it is different.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you're on point. There's a chat absolutely buzzing. Tariq mentions, the Lakers cut Matt Ryan, which opens a roster spot. So watch this space. The Knicks will make a move,
Yeah.
whether it's a big one or a minor one. We got some contracts to shed, and heading in, and Leon always makes a move, usually right earlier before the trade period with Cam, with Rose. But as Knicks Nation continues to rock out with us, EJ and myself, let's look at some positives. I want to talk about Emmanuel Quickly, because talk about other GMs knowing a Knicks piece that other GMs know what kind of player that is. That's
hmm
because we've actually done pretty good things with IQ this season. We've reduced Derrick Rose's role, and
hmm
throughout IQ's Knicks career, we've given him that foray to be that shine off the bench. The league kind of knows who Emmanuel Quickly is, and no coincidence, he's the one GMs are calling about. You
Yeah.
know, we hear the noise that teams are calling because they know who IQ is. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, first off, again, like I'm someone who tries to be really honest. Shout out to Thibs to giving IQ that first call off the bench and not it being Derrick Rose. When we did our preseason
Mm.
expectations with the great Mark Berman, I said that Derrick Rose would be the X factor. I did not imagine it would be in this way, where
Oh,
he'd be the
yeah.
missing factor. X, we're solving for X, and IQ would be solving for X. That was a math joke. Um,
Do you think it's just health related, or do you think it's like more than that?
I think it's more than that. I mean, because when there have been games, for example, recently, I think it may have been the Milwaukee game when Jalen Brunson got injured, or he got banged up a little bit. Derrick Rose did have a little bit more run. So I think availability doesn't seem to be the issue, at least at this point. Maybe earlier in the season, there was some availability issues. But I think that there is a concerted effort to figure out what IQ is and to give him a lot more runway to really work out any concerns or any questions of development. And he's really growing more and more this season. And so again, like I said earlier, I'm happy to see on the court, as your second unit, a lot of run for IQ. Like it's good to see that. And especially recently, like some of those issues that we saw emerging in the preseason have subsided some. Where it's like, that idea of I don't have to take every shot, I can create for others. And his rebounding. I mean, come on. It's been solid.
Yeah, the shot's starting to fall now. And I guess if you're an opposing GM, what you're looking at is upside, Can this player on the Knicks or whatever the IQ I'm seeing, could we nab him for cheap and could he go to another level? And he is absolutely a Knicks player that he may cap out at a six man, or he may be a defined role as a scoring spark, but there's no doubt IQ has upside. Like in terms of a player that could be that lead guard, he could get his playmaking to another level. The floater and the shot's pretty sound for a young player in the league. What the Knicks do with him probably it doesn't get enough buzz. It's talk about Obi and Randle, but what the Knicks do with IQ is going to be profound, because we're paying Jalen Brunson, lead guard money. We're paying RJ Barrett lead guard money. So do we go and pay a third guard lead guard money, or what kind of contract he demands? Does his camp want him in a different situation, maybe to get a bigger role and get the bag?
All great questions. And I think that I honestly do think that again, I don't have any intel, but
you hear some things in Long Island,
I know who you're referring to. No intel from there. But if you're watching, my friend, hit me up. Let me know if you know anything. But I think that Derrick Rose is probably going to be gone by the trade deadline. It just, and I've been saying it since the start of the season, that there are just some teams where it makes sense for them to, because again, like Dallas, it makes sense. Lakers, it makes sense. And like there are just some natural trade partners where there isn't the animosity, there isn't a level of, well, we don't do business with the Knicks. I think, D Rose will be gone. The signs seem to be pointing to that by the trade deadline. I'm sorry, Tariq. I'm sorry. But it just seems to be pointing that way. But I think that the reason why it's likely is because you don't want to have to, in a league that you have to worry about contracts and salary cap. It allows for there to be more burn for IQ. So again, I think that once that happens, you have more ability to kind of understand what you're going to do with IQ and a possible contract for 2023, 2024.
Yeah, I think nothing's predetermined either. Like we could definitely see him get traded. The thing is, it feels longer into the season, but I keep going back to the point that we're only a quarter way into the season. Like these next 20-something games could really shape what they do. Maybe we haven't yet seen it yet. Maybe D Rose stays. Maybe we pull off 6-7 straight wins and we get ourselves back up the standings, and then they go, no, let's use this season and do what was intended to go far and try to get wins. The center situation's fascinating because Jericho Sims honestly has looked better than Isaiah Hartenstein for me.
Yeah.
me personally, and I'm glad he's getting minutes though too. Like that's a win for Thibs and the fan base. The fact that there's been some foul trouble, there's been other things to give Jericho that opportunity, because he would be a player that if I was another GM, I'm like, what, we could get this guy, like he's surplus for them.
Jericho Sims, my gosh. I mean, we just need to give him a great nickname. We need Knicks Buzz to like come up and have like just a brain trust to just like, what are we gonna nickname him? Springs, you know,
Jumpman Jericho, maybe.
Jumpman.
I like
um,
that.
yeah,
He is
Jumpman
sponsored
Jericho.
by, I think he's sponsored by the Jordan brand, I think.
Yeah, he
But
just
if he's not, he
needs,
should be.
we need like, jump over the wall Jericho. Like we just need we need a nickname for him because those alley oops when he
Oh,
gets, it's kind of scary like how high he gets up there. Yeah, but
yeah.
like and that's why if you're Leon Rose, you know, this is where like you should really own the media. And like if you're on a conference call, if you're in a media scrum, and you don't have like you do a media scrum before the trade deadline or after the trade deadline, you beat your chest and say, hey, I selected Jericho Sims, and that's someone we're invested in. You beat your drum and you say, okay, we're proud of these selections, because that's a find. What will he be? We don't necessarily know, but there is some potential there. And again, we do have a glut there at center with Hartenstein. Let me say it the correct way.
Einstein, yeah.
Hartenstein, uh, Robinson, and Jericho. But it'd be good to see Jericho get a little bit more burn.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a great story, Jericho. I don't know how many years in college, but that was a situation where you can find a ready-made NBA player that's had a few years in college. And like you said, when you draft a freshman, it's like that there's more question marks on their upside and what they can do in the league.
Hmm.
You draft a player that's had a few years in college, you have a bigger scouting sample size in terms of getting a nice role player. Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
and also more coaching, more tutelage, understanding the game, understanding like how to play team defense, understanding just even like and again like I just know from experience, just knowing developmentally speaking, what happens when a player goes from ages 18 to 23, just the emotional maturity that you see develop. And it's why you do see certain players in multiple sports, they seem to like have this renaissance sometimes. Like Dennis Smith Jr. is a great example of it, where
yeah,
sometimes just something clicks as they mature. It's not the physical maturation, it's the emotional and intellectual maturation that starts to take place. You're not necessarily out as much, because you're excited at 18, 19 to be part of the league. You're making millions of dollars for the first time. By the time you're 20, 22, you start to realize, okay, well, this is a job. I have X amount of years to make X amount of money to create not only wealth for myself and my immediate family, but perhaps generational wealth. So that maturity, it allows for there to be a little bit more of a possible find. And I think Jericho Sims is a find.
mm,
And I think the fact that he has a few more years experience than other players, that helps.
yeah, absolutely, definitely, man. A couple of things we'll touch on
Hmm.
before we end the show, and that's I want to talk about your thoughts on RJ season so far. Let's talk about Grimes, Cam, and Obi and Randle. Moving forward, because there's been some great positives. Cam and Grimes. Um, the thing is about this organization, they signed Fournier the year they drafted Grimes, when I felt like
Yeah.
they should have believed in their draft pick a bit more. And I know they were trying to go in after that fourth seed.
Hmm.
Uh, I know hindsight's there as well, but yeah, I'm just glad we have Cam and Grimes now. Our defense has picked up.
Yeah.
If the shooting gets better from both of them, then we're going to win more games.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I would like to publicly, again, I don't know if he's watching, but Cameron, if I may, Elijah Reddish, Cam to most of Knicks Nation, I'd like to apologize because, based upon the preseason, I didn't think that there was going to be much there. But, there is a genuine electricity that emerges when he's on the court. It's a it's almost as if when he's on the court, there's more of a possibility that something can happen, that there is more of a probability that there can be some sort of turnover that will happen, that he'll be able to force something on the defensive end. His
Yeah.
ability to maneuver in the paint, like what's kind of interesting is that Cam has the ability to finish in the paint in ways that I wish RJ did. It's almost as if like he has the ability to position himself in ways where it creates more opportunity for there to be finishing in the paint that RJ doesn't quite seem to have that. And again, like there seems to be more spring and energy in his defense. And so I want to give Grimes a little bit more time, obviously, to get rounded into shape for this from the start of the season, because obviously he started later than everyone else. But I'm excited to see what those two can be as part of the rotation. Very excited to see what they could be as part of the rotation.
Yeah, that's the gamble and the upside that you bank on where this organization's at. We hit on a couple of them. There are starting wings and then a backup wing. I mean, I really feel like they're closest to that prototypical wing than RJ Barrett right now. I mean, I know RJ Barrett's our guy. I'm praying, hoping for him, rooting for him to be a big piece for this moving forward. And yeah, the extension hasn't even kicked in. But with RJ, it's about, we hit on before, EJ, it's about being smart,
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
forcing your way, forcing these bad habits. Just clean the slate, forget about being the 3rd overall pick, signing
Yeah.
the contract. Just be sound each game. Try to build consistency, efficiency. Don't try to score 22 points every night. Take what the defense gives you. Be a willing facilitator. Shoot the mid-range shot as well. And I think we're going to see a better finish for this season with RJ.
Yeah. I mean, and RJ came in with, I don't think that there were many I don't think there were many fans or analysts who in RJ's draft who thought that he would be the second or best player out of that draft. I think that it was pretty conclusive from that draft that it was going to be Zion or Ja who were going to be the best players out of the draft. I think we've gone back and forth as to who was the best player, whether it's Zion or whether it's Ja. That's a debate for another time. But I think one of the things that RJ really showed early on was that he had a willingness. Where we are right now is the question of, okay, you clearly have some holes that cause issues, whether it's, the decision, like late game decisions or driving to the basket. What are you going to do to adjust? It's not often that, you have someone who you're rooting for and you don't necessarily want to trade away. But at the same time, you can kind of see the glaring issues. And my hope, much the same as you, is my hope is really that there's a point that he's able to find the ways to adjust his game to grow in a way where you can see an evolution in his game.
You've talked about his fit with Randle and some redundancies there with some past shows. What are your thoughts now with RJ's season that we've seen so far? Do you feel like something has to happen to clear the space for him? What are your thoughts on what we'll see? Do you just want to wait the rest of this season and then make a call in the summer? Or
I think I think RJ's game this season is a function of the extent to which he's grown as an individual player, but it's also a function of how much the team has changed around him. In past seasons, it was Julius as your number one option, and then RJ as your number two option. And you had Evan Fournier, who could be, your wing player who was a 3-point threat. The starting lineup hasn't necessarily presented, and we talked about this, several times when we talked about, picking up Jalen Brunson. The starting lineup hasn't, for the most part, always consistently been adept at hitting open shots or like, necessarily being able to space the floor enough to be um, consistently staggered in ways that benefits RJ's game. And
Yeah,
I think that as a younger player, he, in some way, shape, or form, is still trying to figure out, okay, now that we now have Jalen Brunson, what does that do to my game? How do I still average respectable numbers while still adhering to this system and still allowing Jalen Brunson to be Jalen Brunson, allowing Julius to be Julius, and even affording touches to Q Dot and Mitchell Robinson? Because we've talked about this before too. Mitchell Robinson has no problem saying, like, hey, I want to get touches as
mm,
well. So this is not just an RJ issue. I think it's still an entire team fit issue.
yes,
If Julius is
yeah,
moved, I think that it might, depending on what's picked up in response, it might clear some of those questions, those concerns,
yeah,
those limitations that are a part of RJ's game.
yeah. I'm with you on that. I root for all Knicks to succeed, but yeah,
Hmm.
after a bigger sample size, I make form my decisions on what I feel like would move our team forward more. And I think with Randle, I think he's the first player outside of Fournier and things like that, a biggest piece that would go ahead of Brunson and RJ and Obi. Um, RJ and Randle, the redundancies between them two is they're both volume scorers. You know, they're
Hmm.
both that situation. RJ's had great games when Randle, hasn't played. He gets that usage, he gets that spacing, that opportunity. But I also feel like it's not just the players. You hit that point about the coaching. Doesn't it feel like sometimes it's just I pass it to you, you go one on one. He passes
Yeah,
it to me, I go one on. It's
yeah,
just back and forth.
yeah,
And then there's Brunson now, which complicates things because he's holding the ball, dribbling it up. He's a volume scorer himself. So yeah, I could see why a lot of these players aren't fitting great in terms of like a smooth offense. And yes, our offense has improved, but it's not really smooth. Here's the ball, you do your thing. EJ, I'm passing it to you now. You go, get your man. You go to the cup. It's
yeah.
it's lack of play calling.
And it's also like lack of, I think part of it is also movement. So there was a play the other night. I don't know, we're not talking about them, but I think that there was a play where it might have been Hartenstein and I'm forgetting who it was exactly. It might have been Cam, but Hartenstein expected someone to cut. And it's almost as if we don't see that very often with our squad. Because the philosophy tends to be ISO, all right, my ISO time, ISO kick out. And that actually was going to be one of my gripes is that there is like
Yeah,
sometimes a lack of we're moving towards the basket and there's rotations that's happening in the offensive set. Oftentimes we'll like try to penetrate into the lane and we're kicking it right back out. And it's like, okay, now we're going to heave a 26 footer or a 27 footer. You haven't necessarily broken down the defense in a real logical way. It's just like, all right, I ISO'd. I'm tired. I don't know what to do with the ball, so I'm going to just jump up and throw it somewhere and hope you can hit a 27
yeah,
shot, so a 27-foot shot a hand in your face. Um, that's not just RJ. That's multiple players. You guys who are consistent Knicks Buzz, part of the Knicks Buzz family, know that one of the teams I love watching is Golden State because of movement. And movement creates opportunity. And unfortunately, because we have several players who are ISO heavy, we do ourselves a disservice because we lose scoring opportunities.
yeah. More guys that should be willing passers. I feel like, yeah.
Hmm.
Great ball movement. Whoever gets the best shot,
Yeah.
open shot, instead of more just forcing isolation, one on one. And yeah, let's open the floor for you. I want you to throw any questions out there, address anything that you've had on your mind, on your chest since watching these Knicks this season. Anything we didn't touch on with John that you wanted to address, moving forward with this tough stretch coming up. We got Dallas coming up, which is under pressure.
Oh yeah. I have two
Mm,
things. First, well, actually three things. First off, missed you guys, Knicks Buzz. Shout out to you, CT. Thank you for always
mm,
making this an open door for me. So, you're my guy. The second thing is John Schmelk mentioned the idea of the defense, and one of the things that's been a real big gripe of mine, a real big frustration of mine, and I think to a certain extent this is effort, is um, there are too many nights where defending the home court seems more difficult than when the Knicks are playing away. Um, this has become a trend in the last couple of years where um, guys who are barely stars or are never stars play like superstars at Madison Square Garden. That is frustrating. That has become increasingly frustrating. Um, that is a function of defense. What are your thoughts on that, CT?
I'm sharing that same thing. That's something I wanted to get off my chest as well, because they talk about how hard the playing for the Knicks are, the heaviest jersey, the speculation, the spotlight. I mean, MSG, we've seen it for years now, decades. Players come in, and I made the point too with West Coast teams, they only get that one Garden game per
Hmm.
year. So, like a dude like Ja Morant, he has to wait 12 whole months to
Yeah,
come into the Garden just for that one game. You
one game.
don't think that they pencil that on their calendar and say, hey, like I'm leaving a legacy. I'm leaving my mark out there as well. So the Knicks need to focus even harder than they normally would. 48 minutes of focus as well. They're capable of doing it. It's just it's the hardest, toughest arena to play at, for the home side, like, you know, um, and the fans. We get a lot of tourists. I haven't had that pleasure of being there yet. I'm going to be there soon. Best believe that. But from everything I hear from you guys and hold me down, is that the Garden's not that hostile environment like you would get at
You
Oklahoma.
stole the words out of my mouth.
You know, the Memphis Grizzlies, the grit and grind squad out in I mean, those small market teams like Dallas, Dallas included, they can create that crazy environment. At the Garden, we're cheering for like Kobe to score 60
Yeah.
and showing love to Steph Curry for going off. I mean, it's all fun and for the show Broadway, but let's just deck MSG out with the most diehards possible.
Hey,
Then then we'll see some fire.
CT's blade. I'm glad CT said it because CT. This is Nick's buzz. This is you, baby. But that was my other. So like to the first point, and I'm going to hit on that as well too. Um, Jeremy Grant,
Oh,
Anthony Simons. Between the two of them, they scored over 80 points.
Joshua Hart, career high, 19 rebounds.
I mean, yeah, that's problematic. Um, and I want to shout out Dirty Dancer because this is my last point of the night.
Yeah,
My issue in the Milwaukee game, okay, there's obviously Giannis is a man. He's a man beast. He's an otherworldly player. But I don't know why. I don't know why, but for some reason, one of the things that really bothered me during that game was seeing a number of fans, and I'm going to get into trouble for saying this, but during the game, I'm talking about the fourth quarter, Giannis is at the free throw line. We all know that Giannis, as a free throw shooter, very spotty. But
very. Yeah.
if you looked around the lower bowl, and Knicks fans, Knicks buzz, please get my back on this. How many fans did you see doing this in the lower bowl? Quiet, quiet, arms folded. That to me is really problematic. It's really problematic because it's like it becomes Broadway. It's like, and I'm talking about
Yeah.
the whole lower bowl where it's like you don't feel the
That,
only place you feel that energy. And I've been to Knicks games. I've been to Knicks games. I need to go to a few this season, but that was really disheartening where you can hear the energy coming from the upper bowl, from like the 300s. But that lower bowl where I know the ticket prices are in the thousands of dollars. Trust me, I've tried to sit there before, and I'm like,
yeah.
I need to work 15 jobs to be able to work to sit there. Um, I have a problem with that lower bowl. to not antagonize Giannis on the free throw line, and you end up losing by a few points. And it's like you can see it around the entirety of that lower bowl where it seems to lack that energy. It's making me question the extent to which Madison Square Garden really is like home court advantage.
Yeah, a lot of the diehards that own those tickets, a lot of them sell a few, throughout the
Yeah,
regular season. They can't attend all of them. So what you get is real spectators. Really, they're just in town for the weekend, and oh, honey, let's go to a Knick game. We're in town once a year. It's
yeah.
it's just that it's the show that they want to go see. It's not really the New York Knicks that they want to, that they want to die hard root for. And like Dirty said, it takes couple stops for the defense to start, the defense to buckle down
Yeah,
before that
yeah.
arena gets absolutely pumping. But yeah,
Can
I think
can
it's a lot to do with the pressure too, EJ. Like the players do feel pressure playing on that arena.
Yeah, and to Cameron, I'm not saying that the players don't play well at home because of the fans. I'm saying that it's playing home court statistically should be an advantage for a home team. And
Yeah,
part of it is that it should be a hostile environment. It feels within the last few seasons, Madison Square Garden
yeah,
doesn't feel as hostile as it once did. And so as a result, what ends up happening is that it's not as much of an advantage as it should be as it is for other teams across the league. So I'm not saying like it's the singular reason why the Knicks have a losing record. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying that is part of the issue is that when you have fans who are showing no emotion, who don't seem vocally invested in the game the way that they are, let's say, in Milwaukee, the way that they are, let's say, in Oklahoma City, there are reasons why like it becomes more of a
yeah,
disadvantage. Last quick point, I promise it'll be really quick. Players who come to play at Madison Square Garden shouldn't only feel like this is a big stage. They should feel like it's the biggest stage and it should be pressure packed. It shouldn't be this, oh, I'm going to go off and show off and like score 81. I'm going to show off and score 61. I'm going to show off and be like Jordan, score a double nickel 55. It should be like, oh, it's so
facts.
much pressure that it feels like I can't perform there because the bright lights are there. This is like a sound stage, but it's also like, oh, these fans are really into it. And
Yeah,
it's overwhelming, but it doesn't feel like that. It feels like it's a neutral court at times, except for the upper
yeah.
bowl.
I completely agree. You and I have seen, over 50 years of Knicks games, enough to see at the Garden. I think I'll give my 2 cents about why I think we're in this situation at home. I think we're
Mhm.
missing a bit of that enforcer.
Yeah,
I think that year, and I haven't looked this up. I've been really wanting to look this up the last few days. But that year we had Mook Morris and Bobby Portis
yeah.
with with Fizdale. I know it was a bad season, but I think our home record might have been good that season. I want to I want to look at
I'm
that
looking it up right now.
because like you said, we didn't. Opponents came into the Garden scared. You got Chippy, Marcus Morris, those kinds of guys. I think RJ Barrett and Randle, they lose focus throughout the game. Sometimes they mentally they're not the strongest players, and that's proof that they play well on the road. Julius
Yeah,
Randle played
yeah,
amazing in pandemic empty bubble arenas.
yeah.
Um, Stats back that up. So I think those guys feel more pressure at MSG, RJ's, Randall's, and that's why they play better on the road. They play with a nothing at stake kind of house money mentality. We're going to give it our all. But at MSG, they maybe wilt under more of the pressure. I feel.
Yeah,
And again,
yeah.
we lack that enforcer, that someone who strikes fear into somebody.
Absolutely. And I think that's a part of, like, and I go back a while with the Knicks. Like, I go back to the ages of like Charles Oakley, obviously legend. You had Anthony Mason, when we had Chris Herring
Oh
on,
yeah,
so much of his book was about the legend of Anthony Mason. You can talk about Mook Morris. You can talk about people like Kurt Thomas, who when I was going to school, like my friend and I, and shout out my friend Brett, we nicknamed him Crazy Eyes because like, you were just always worried what was Kurt Thomas thinking. Sean Williams, you had these aggressive players who they levied they levied Anthony Bonner. You know, they
Yeah,
had a level of, okay, we're not going to take any stuff. You know, even John
yeah,
Starks, right, for being a wing, you know, his level of crazy and his willingness to go neck and neck with a Reggie Miller or Michael Jordan, go, you know, toe to toe, the iconic shot of him headbutting Reggie Miller, that added to a level of like, okay, this is Madison Square Garden. You're going to have to fight to win. There's a reason why Chris Herring's book is called what it's called, Blood in the Garden. Um,
yeah,
those days seem to be over, which obviously basketball has changed, but
yeah.
the
It
hostile
has.
environment that comes from the fans as well.
Yep. And if you're not no talented lockdown defender, there are other ways. Like I said, I'm not here trying to call every player soft. Don't get me wrong. I just
Hmm.
feel like, and you know, and I go back to that Fizdale team. I think Brandon Jennings was on that team. When Brandon
Hmm.
Jennings signed as a Knick, the first thing he said in a press conference was like, "The Garden's amazing. I'm going to give it my all." And I know the signing didn't work out, but you could see there were times when he buckled down, pulled his shorts up, clapped back in the player's face.
Yeah,
Marcus Morris threw the ball. Remember, he smashed the ball in that dude's face.
yeah,
That
yeah,
kind that kind of thing. It's like we're not seeing that at all, and I'm surprised because Tom Thibodeau is from that Van Gundy, Pat Riley, um, situation. And like go back to that Portland game, that was by far the most frustrating loss for me.
yeah,
Three career highs: Josh Hart 19 rebounds,
yeah.
Jeremy Grant 44 points, and Anthony Simons 38 points, season high.
Yeah, and bro,
You know,
I'll even say this, like even if the league has changed, we've seen ways where players have been able to energize it, and it's symbiotic, right? It's the players who feed off the fans, but it's also the fans who feed off the players. So, um, one of my favorite teams was like that Steve Novak, Pablo Prigioni,
oh,
you know, J.R. Smith team, the Iman Shumpert team. So they weren't necessarily a physical team, the 2013-2014 team, but there was an energy there which made the Garden hostile. So that when Woody was coaching, like you knew you were going to be in for a fight. So it doesn't always have to be physical, but also the energy. Like if when Steve Novak hit that wing, and and you know he's about to hit the discount double check, there was a clear energy. Like when you go back and you watch those games, Linsanity. And it's not just about the team being good. It's also about what happens then on the Garden. You didn't have fans just sitting there. Guys, like rewatch the Milwaukee game. It's crazy. Like when you watch that lower bowl, how many fans were just sitting there and it's like, all right, this is a great time, but I'm not going to say anything. Like it was
is it?
kind of disturbing.
Is that also maybe they were diehard fans? Is it maybe they were less invested in this team? Maybe they like, oh, we've seen this script play out a few times. I'm not because I've been talking to a lot of fans, and even the most diehard fans right now, they just don't feel any emotional connection to this team right now. They're just like, yeah, I tune in and I'm rooting for it, but I mean, we're stuck in the middle basically in terms of some fans want us to just rebuild with all the youth, and
Hmm.
some teams want us to land that big star ASAP. So I'm not questioning no one's fandom, but a lot of fans are right in the middle where it's like I'm just not as invested in this thing until I see a change.
See, that's the crazy thing though, because I think that with a 500 team, like if the Knicks were really bad, I could totally understand it. If like they were like, um, if the Knicks were like really just getting blown out game after game after game, if it were like
Yeah,
really abundantly clear that Thibodeau was getting fired like tomorrow, like we were on Steve Nash watch, like we're like, okay, he's going to get fired tomorrow this week, I could kind of buy that argument. But the same thing is one of the things about a 500 team is that you are probably in most of the games you're playing. Like you have a puncher's chance
oh
of
yeah,
winning. Like the Milwaukee game, even though we lost, it was a thrilling game. Like it was a really good game because like you're going against
Memphis.
one of the we Memphis game was really thrilling. Like I mean, again, we didn't win, but guys, like there was a shot for
Mm.
us to win the game. So if you're a fan and you're like, all right, I'm not really invested, it's kind of weird because yes, we're not going to win a championship. Yes, we're not going to win it, but these are really close games. And like I know that we may not win it, but I'm entertained by these games. I stood the entire fourth quarter watching the Milwaukee game, and I'm like,
Mm.
I'm like off the couch. I'm like, okay, I can't sit down because this is so close. Like we're, a 50-50 ball away from possibly winning. Like, Jalen Brunson misses the free throw. I'm like standing next to the TV, and I have a pretty healthy sized TV. There's no reason for me to be standing, but that's what seems so weird about the game is that to not have that passion there, that was kind of disconcerting. That was kind of worrying. Like, so
Yeah.
what does playing at Madison Square Garden now mean if, we can have people who are like, and shout out to the people in the 300s and the 400s and all the way up on top, but like, that it was kind of
Yeah.
concerning to see it in the lower bowl.
Yeah. Yeah. And what I mean was, I didn't mean where the Knicks' future direction stuck, Tariq. I
Hmm.
meant stuck between what a lot of the fan base want on either side. Some want us to trade everything for that spider, and some want us to just play every young player. So to some people, we're right in between. This front office ain't too bad. They have flexibility, but I think fans are also feeling like EJ. We feel like the Knicks are predictable, but it's unpredictable as well.
Yeah.
Like we don't really know what on any given night now. It's only a quarter away into the season, so we're not overreacting. But it's like Cam's only just got back in. Grimes we haven't really seen a whole lot of. So I just want to see a 20-game stretch where we get everyone healthy, and then we really judge what's going on. I like the point where Obi and Randle are playing more, but I just don't know
Hmm.
how sustainable that is long term with three centers on the roster.
Yeah, and that's why I think that I think the trade deadline will, I think we'll kind of know what the team is within the next 10, 15 games. And I think that the front office, if they are
Yeah,
competent and they've shown themselves to be competent, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're the best front office in the league, but they've proven themselves to be competent, that they will make moves according to what they think is a likely projection for what will happen for the rest of the season. I think, yeah, and here's the other thing too. We've seen this the last few seasons in the league, is the first 10 games, some teams play out of their minds, and then by the
yeah,
20 game mark, things start to shake. Like there's no way Brooklyn is going to be, it. Well, okay, let me shut up about Brooklyn because who knows what
no,
might happen with
give
them.
us the hot take.
Okay, I mean,
And because I've got a few to talk about Miami, I said a few teams were overhyped, like the Bulls,
yeah,
Miami. Yeah,
and you've been saying that too. Like, and that's the thing. Like, I can't say what the Knicks are yet because you have to then say what Miami's going to be, what Chicago's going to be, and I don't think they've quite fully developed or matured into what they're going to be. Because I think right now Miami's out of the playoffs or they're in the play-in right now.
yeah,
Um, so it's going to take like 10 to 20 more games for us to kind of clearly see what the playoff landscape looks like, for us to then determine what does that mean then for the Knicks.
yeah. Great point. And we're still evaluating. Really, we're a quarter way in,
Absolutely.
ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, everyone. Best thing about this fan base, everyone's got their opinions and takes, and we evaluate as we go along. But boy, does it just a lot of emotions come to mind this season because we've seen so many good wins on the road, and then we've
Hmm.
seen these heartbreakers at home that we just really want to pull out. The Memphis, the Portland one, the Bucks one. But tell you what, let's look ahead now. I'm looking forward to Dallas. I'm looking forward to Cleveland and Donovan Mitchell coming into MSG, and then
Yes, sir.
Trey Ice Cold Young coming
It
in.
is.
Give us,
It is cold in New York, by the way.
yeah. Let's hope we freeze him out and Deuce McBride can get in his shorts. Quentin Grimes, Cam Reddish, make it tough on these guys. Remember DeJounte Murray the last
Yeah.
time he was up in here?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I will say this too. Like, Dejounte Murray, as difficult as he can be in terms of like, with a little bit of the showmanship, that would have played so perfectly in New York. He would have been the perfect New York pest, like that guy who gets into like it. So I get that.
Villain.
Yeah, that villain, our villain.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm interested in this stretch of games too, particularly once we get a little bit later, closer to the holidays. The Chicago games. Really fascinating how there are two Chicago games back to back. There's a Wednesday Chicago game and a Friday Chicago game, all in Chicago, and then we play them again like 6 or 7 days later at the Garden.
Yeah. Yeah. Continue to play. Yeah, these players that are part of your future, which has been one of the most pleasing things. I think Jalen Brunson to me has to be top, but Chat, Streets, EJ. Second thing would have to be that, a lot of these players are getting shine that we didn't maybe predict in the first quarter. That Cam Reddish trade could really position itself now to be a shrewd move if he's a long-term piece. Sims, Quick, Grimes has looked like legit in the short sample size. Really looking forward to this stretch. I really feel like we could get back to 500 after the ATL game.
Yeah. I'm taking a look at the calendar as well. The Mavericks game is going to be really interesting to me because the Mavericks appear to be one of those teams that, again, as we get past the 20 game mark, there's going to be more clarity, as I've mentioned before. Smart move, Philip Ross. You're going to get a shout out once you put that in. You're going to get it. You're going to blow up in the chat. Come on, that was a smart move. Smart
Cannot
man.
wait. And go USA.
Yes,
US
Christian
team.
Pulisic. All right.
Team USA.
Yeah,
Actually,
so
they will meet. Australia and USA will meet if both win their next game.
what are we going to do?
There'll be a watch party, I think.
Are we going to do a Knicks buzz Australia versus USA if that happens? We might have to do a watch along for that.
Yeah, there might be some consumption as well.
So we have to figure out what we would name it. So it wouldn't be Knicks buzz at that point. It'd be like World Cup buzz. Like
if Australia can beat Lionel Messi, then I'll be more than buzzing.
The thoughts and views of CT only represent CT.
Yeah. I got to make sure it's on a different channel. I'll send you all the link, but I don't want to get this channel. I don't want to get any strikes on.
Oh yeah.
This channel,
Yeah.
It'll be World Cup buzz.
Yes, World Cup buzz. That'd be really great. We're gonna brand everything to everything buzz. But no, I'm interested to see what happens with the Dallas game. And also there's some really interesting games of like we were talking about before, teams that are in almost similar positions, but not necessarily in the enviable position where they actually have assets they can move to improve. So again, Charlotte is in this weird position. Those 3 games that are going to be with the Bulls, that could help better position the Knicks because if you can beat Chicago 2 out of 3, that creates some distance between you and Chicago. So by the time we get to Christmas, by the time we get to New Year's, I think we will figure out clearly where the Knicks are going.
Absolutely. And lastly, let's touch on Leon Rose because I want to make a point about him. I really feel like he's a mover and shaker. I really feel that there's pressure that's building. He put RJ in that trade for Donovan. We know his intentions. I really feel like if he's feeling that pressure, he's going to make a move. Leon Rose doesn't strike me as a guy that's just going to sit. Remember, there was a few trade deadlines where we did nothing. I don't see that happening. I'll be shocked if the Knicks just stand pat. He's getting a lot of consultation. He's getting calls. That's my last thought. I really feel like Leon Rose, 3rd year of his regime now. I don't think he's going to stand pat. Like I said, a lot of these young players were in the Donovan Mitchell trade talk.
Yeah.
And his end goal is beyond what we're seeing. I think he wants to remain president for a long time. He gave up the CAA job to be the Knicks president. He gave up a lot,
Yeah. Yeah. No, I definitely agree, and I think that once again, we have to look at it in the backdrop of what's happening in the league as well. I think that this trade deadline is going to be a pretty busy trade deadline around the league, and so that then lends itself to the Knicks being active as well. And I think the last 2 years, the Knicks have made deals like 2 or 3 weeks in advance of the deadline, and it usually just being like one deal. I can imagine the Knicks doing 2 or 3 or being part of, some other, bigger deals, maybe like two or three team trades,
Yeah,
deals as well. So
yeah, facts.
yeah, I think they're going to be very busy at the deadline.
Yep, yeah, facts. And we'll just answer a last few questions from everyone.
Yep.
Philip says, does anyone think sometimes closing out the games, it should be Grimes and Cam? What are your thoughts?
Philip, to that question, I think the other question is who else is on the floor? So are you assuming that Jalen Brunson's on the floor, Mitch is on the floor, and
Randle?
Randle? So that's going to be the issue. Is that's why John Schmuck was talking about consolidating the roster earlier. Is if Randle's still there, Randle's still going to be on the floor. If Randle's no longer on the team, then that opens it up to have Cam and Q be on the floor at the same time with Jalen, with RJ, and with Mitch. But so long as Randle's on the floor, it kind of limits what you can do in terms of opening up those end game rosters.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I like that look. I think we just need to continue to be flexible.
Hmm.
Situations will unfold if RJ Barrett's in foul trouble or if he's got to miss a game. Um, I really feel like a blessing of this Cam situation is because Grimes was injured. It's
Yeah.
amazing how in sport, like Lynn Sanity got his start. Like sometimes an unfortunate circumstance opens the door for us to see an amazing thing.
Yep.
Um, you know, uh,
Absolutely.
everyone's talking about Jericho Sims. I don't wish injury on anybody, but who knows throughout this season, he could be a huge piece that we need. Um, we rely upon.
Yeah.
And 007 us, after 3 years of Thibs with no daylight in sight, all the assets we have, if we don't make the playoffs, would you blow it up and fire Thibs? Um, I'll answer this one first. I'll
Hmm.
get your thoughts. I think, yeah, this season I leave things as they are, and I make a decision in the off season, and I let Thibs go in the off season, um, not just because of the playoffs. It really probably doesn't even change my opinion. Playoffs, or even if we miss out, I think it'd be a nice clean slate in the off season to start with a different coach. Because I think we're years away from winning a chip, and I think Tom Thibodeau's main strengths are with a veteran stacked roster.
Yeah. 007 Angelo. I think that once you fire Tibbs, the clock on Leon starts ticking louder.
Mhm.
So that's something that you have to consider because um, who becomes the coach afterwards will determine what they think the timeline is for the organization. If you're going with a younger coach, you're more likely thinking, okay, this is going to be a long-term rebuild. If you go with a more veteran coach, you're thinking that there's a possibility of winning. So I think that's where I don't know. I can't imagine. I don't know. I shouldn't say that. You kind of have to let the playoff. You have to kind of see how they don't make the playoffs. If it's like because they're getting blown out after blown out after blown out, that's different than okay, this kind of like week that they've had where they've lost close games. There's a difference in how the season plays out that way.
Yeah, and I'm not no Tibbs basher or hater. I like some of the things he does. Um, the main reason why I want to get rid of him, I don't like our schemes, our
Hmm.
offensive sets. I think the game's evolved a bit, and the main reason is yeah, he's more of um, better suited to a roster that can contend.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
do you think Tibbs is afraid of disciplining RJ and Randall's bad D? Um, I think it's a bit of that. Yeah, I think if you look at any team, the big dogs are always afforded more leeway than a role player. It's just it's just how it is. Yeah, you can't really lose the locker room in that way. Um, as well as I think hurting any sort of potential look around the league, EJ, like trade value, things like that.
Yeah,
You know, the fact that the positive thing this season around the league is that Randle's, got his head on straight this season,
yeah,
and he's connected a bit.
yeah. CT hit the nail on the head. I think also there's another element of it that's a little bit different. You don't want to hurt the trade value of players that command so much of a salary because, again, you want them to be tradable assets, particularly Randle. You know that Randle is someone I think that they're looking to possibly move at some point, whether the trade deadline or at the end of the season. The other thing too is I think the hard truth of it, and I'm just coming to accept it, is maybe Thibs has come to the realization that at least for Randle is what he is in terms of his defensive liabilities. And to try to discipline him, to try to improve it, would disciplining him improve his defense? Maybe he just is what he is defensively. I don't necessarily have the same conclusion for RJ because RJ is still young enough where maybe there's untapped potential. But again, like it doesn't seem like Julius is ever going to make like all defensive team at this point. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, another point I'll quickly add was that I think maybe this front office, there's a chance they're not too concerned with like this season, how whatever happens. Maybe
Yeah.
there's all this talk, we must make the playoffs, we must make the play-in. Internally, maybe they've already spoken and said, let's just see, if we end up in the lottery, we're in a great position. If we make the play-in, we're in a great position. Maybe they know all these bad traits of these players and they're just willing to let them play out, let it
Yeah.
unfold. Us fans, we're passionate, we ride and die on each tip of the ball. But this
Yeah.
front office is probably just like, hey, let's just see what this season happens and let's make moves. Eddie's question, deadline. We'll have more buzz coming up closer to that deadline. But to me, the first move, unquestionably, would have to be see if Evan Fournier can be moved.
Hmm.
See if there's a taker for that. See who, not that I dangle any player outside of that, but see who puts in a nice offer for Cam or for Quickly, and you listen. That's just business, EJ. You got to listen. Interesting to that point, though. I wonder if we hear what Julius Randle's trade value could be at. Like, we might hear buzz like this
Yeah.
team offered this team offered this.
Yeah, I think that, by the way, there was a Giancarlo Delara question from before that we got to hit too
Yeah, yeah,
for a second. Um, yeah, I think that Fournier will definitely be a conversation. I think D Rose will be a conversation. Other players will be available relative to how the next 20 games go. So I think all players are available. But I think the most obvious ones are, sorry, Tariq, D Rose and Evan Fournier. And I think Evan Fournier will be the one that they want to get rid of the most, even though I think he also will be the most difficult one, aside from Randle, to trade.
yeah. Great points. The good thing is, Fournier is a veteran, and every team in the league knows his value.
Hmm.
I know
Yeah.
we don't have to play him. We don't. I don't think his value is going to get hurt.
Hmm.
And I'm also okay if he stays because I know he's a pro. But
Yeah.
I think the pro in him would prefer to just he'll meet with the front office and he'll say, "Oh, please find me a home because I'm in my prime and I want to play."
You think he
And
gets cut?
gets cut. Do you think
Yeah. I mean, release.
waived?
Yeah, wave.
You know
Thank you.
what? I hadn't even considered that. That's a good point because only one more year after this season.
Exactly.
Um, you know what? I'll say no. I'll tell you why. Because
Right.
either it's this trade deadline or in the off season, that money could be used in a trade. You may need that money, and next season it's expiring salary, so that becomes a weaponized salary that you could use
As an
later.
asset. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you answer Gian's question?
Yeah. So John Carlos' question is, how are we struggling on defense with Thibs? Again, I don't always blame a team struggle on the coach. We all know that Thibs is all about defense. I think sometimes you have to look at the reality of who are the players on the court. And when you look at Jalen Brunson, R.J. Barrett, Julius Randle, Q. Dot, and Mitchell Robinson, who are for the most part your starting five, you have several players as your starting five who struggle, for example, with rotations. When you're watching them guard the perimeter, there are so many times where you can see the rotations just falling apart. You can see that there are lazy closeouts at time. That's not Thibs. That's on players. Particularly when you've seen, the extent to which in Thibs' first season there was a clear emphasis on this, but the parts were somewhat different. The ancillary parts were somewhat different. And that's why I said earlier on the show, I think some of the complaining you see the players do, and I'm sorry, New York City is being New York City right now.
You good?
So I think sometimes when you see players complain, that's sometimes masking limitations on the defense, like the inability to close out, the unwillingness to close out, the unwillingness to hustle back, and I think that's more of the issue. It's not necessarily always Thibs, it's the effort and the ability.
Yeah. And a point not many people have made, I haven't heard this, but the Knicks are playing faster on offense.
Hmm.
So you add something and you lose a little bit of something. We were getting back, we were getting set on defense.
Yeah.
We're up and down. We're playing a lot faster, and our offense is better. So we've regressed defensively a little as well. But I agree. Yeah, the schemes are a part of that. Clogging the paint, leaving some shooters open, and I think Tibbs hopes that it'll regress. The 3-point shooting against us will regress to the mean.
Yeah.
In terms of we're not getting torched so much. Last point I'll make is I think there's no consistency where they go under the screen, go over the screen, switch,
Yeah.
don't switch. Players, sometimes they don't seem connected.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's been games where they've switched really well and we've contained dribble penetration. And then sometimes there's been, like that Portland game. You remember when Julius and RJ were switching onto Jeremy Grant
Yeah. Yeah.
and Simons?
Yeah. And that's part of it. It's like I think there's also like an intelligence in terms of team defense and being able to understand how to read your man, read the offense, see where the ball is. Class says this all the time: see your ball, see the ball, see your man. And this reason why he says it all the time is because it's a persistent issue. And I think the other thing too is it's also indicative of the kind of teams we're playing. Like some of those defensive struggles we've seen against teams like, for example, Milwaukee. Milwaukee is a long team. That is a long team, and you could almost see the energy being sapped out of players because they would try to penetrate into the lane. And they're like, oh, snap. I know my shot's going to get blocked by Booker Lopez, or Giannis might stuff my shot here. You have Drew Holiday, who's incredibly aggressive on defense. And I think that then translates into their energy level on defense as well, because they were expending so much energy on offense. So it's a really complicated situation.
Yeah, definitely. We're going to get ready to wrap this thing up, but I love all the questions coming through. Just pop it in the comment section. If we don't get to everyone, we'll answer it. And then also the post game tomorrow will be on as well. So yeah, we'll continue this conversation. We ain't going nowhere.
Nope.
And Jarvis LaFleur, my man from Lafayette, Louisiana, salute. Question: do we have all the right players to play defense the way Tibbs teams play defense?
Wow. That's a good question. Am I hitting that or are you hitting that?
Yeah.
No, the answer is no. The answer is no. I think that the issue that we have is that the players for whom we rely principally to maintain and to orchestrate our offense are often the players who seem to be most of the liability on defense. And proportionally, like we have more players on defense who are more of a liability than they are able to really maintain the aggression and the cohesion in terms of team defense. And so this ends up being the issue. Like I already mentioned the 3 players in question. Although, like one of the things I will say in Jalen Brunson's defense, with regards to his defense, is he is someone who will try to take charges. You can see that there's an effort level. Sometimes the effort level just can't overcome the ability, particularly when you're talking about a point guard dominant league. But at the same time, I don't know if we have all of the parts to really field
Yeah.
that kind of defense that Thibs would want to
Yeah.
field.
Physically and mentally. I think
Yes.
we don't
Yeah.
have the highest IQ players, and they can lose focus.
Yeah.
Because one thing we know about Thibs, apparently, and this has been confirmed, he produces the most detailed dossiers on opponents, and I think
Yeah.
a lot of these players just don't seem as prepared as
Yeah.
well. If he
Yeah.
does that, but
Yeah.
let's get ready to wrap this thing up. Appreciate everyone rocking out. Great show, EJ. Appreciate you, my man.
Definitely, man. Definitely. Always good to be on Knicks Buzz. Hey, folks, we love you. We thank you guys for supporting us. Please hit that like, subscribe, share this. This is amazing content. We try to be really professional with it. This is the mature Knicks fan, the mature Knicks fans place to discuss all things Knicks.
Yeah, facts. So OGs, young fans, everything like that. We
Yeah.
shout you out. We keep it 100, and more guests coming on. Got another guest lined up next week, which will be fun. And we're getting into the thick of this season, ladies and
Yeah.
gentlemen, the absolute thick of it. You know, think of this as just the warm ups. I think this first quarter is just getting warmed up, and I keep saying that the Knicks will finish this season hot. You know, the slower start, I think we will finish hotter, and we might see a different looking team as well. Much love to the best chat in the biz. Jarvis, appreciate you. Let's get it. Dirty Dancer, appreciate your takes, insight. 007, Angelo, let's get it.
Yeah.
Tariq, yep. Wise head up in here as well. A long time Knicks fan. Eddie, appreciate you jumping in. And yeah, let's talk soon. Keep the conversation going in the chat. Peace. See you tomorrow.